Good evening. Tonight is the 5th of October, 2020, the North Andover Select Board meeting. We'd like to start off with our Pledge of Allegiance, first time in a while. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay, we completed our executive session earlier, so we move to public comment.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 3 public comments. The first one is a letter submitted by the North Andover Merchants Association. It's lengthy, I'm not going to read the entire thing. It was addressed to Representative Minicucci, and basically it is stating what the designation of being a red community is going to have on businesses moving forward, and asking the representative to advocate on their behalf in order to help the business community. Our second public comment is from Karen Klein. She is asking us to call her live during the meeting, so I will do that shortly in 1 minute. Her comment says, with the news of a closure of Merrimack College dorm due to COVID, is it possible to put a COVID tax on local colleges if their plan to keep the community both on campus and in the town safe? This tax would disappear after the pandemic scare is over, whenever that may be. And so I will now call Ms. Klein. Just bear with me for 1 minute. So this is new, and I apologize if it's a little. All right, here we go. I'm going to call Ms. Klein, 978. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah. Oh, very good.
Hi, we're trying to reach Mrs. Klein.
Yes.
This is the
Good evening.
Good evening. This is the North Andover Board of Selectmen.
Hello.
We were just calling you about your public comment.
All right. I had just wondered about the attitude or the belief that maybe the Merrimack College administration would be willing to give us a little bit more support, since we have a COVID issue to deal with ourselves in our town, and they are putting another strain on our facilities by having a very bad outbreak over there at a dorm. And you know, I don't know what the facilities of North Andover, if there's any health inspectors that go over there, or it's all free. We give them free services. And I just believe that maybe for one time there could be some type of a donation or a payment to the town of North Andover in lieu of these efforts that we give out.
So, Mrs. Klein, thank you for your comment. This is the town manager. So, Merrimack College has agreed to pay for public health nurses and contact tracers to assist us moving forward. Obviously, this last outbreak was very trying on our Board of Health staff, and they have recognized that and have agreed to support us moving forward by paying for public health nurses and contact tracers.
Okay, so are you saying within the facility of Merrimack College itself, or to give us a little bit of relief in the town itself?
They're going to give the town money so that we can employ these people.
Oh, I see. For our own use as well as for the Merrimack College, they would be checking the Merrimack College also, or is it just people who are going to be used for town situations, town inspection?
They would be only at Merrimack College. That would free up our public health nurses to work on the regular town issues.
Okay, okay. So it's still pretty much a zero. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, no new funding.
Right, that's what I was wondering about. Okay, well, if that's what the selectmen agree to, you know, we can't do anything more about that. It's just a suggestion I had that I thought maybe would just a one-time fee. I'm not saying forevermore or tax them, you know, for a very long period of time. Just a one-time fee, and you know, that would be it. Okay, thank you so much for your call.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you, Karen.
You too. Stay well.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Melissa, will we have the opportunity to talk about that in more detail? And I know the COVID update is
Yeah, we can.
just one
we
item
certainly
removed,
can.
but
Yes.
Yeah.
We certainly can talk about it. Merrimack will, I'm sure, be part of the COVID update. Our next public comment is Mr. David Brown regarding the Stevens estate. So let me, and if he doesn't answer, he did ask me to try someone else, so let's try David first.
Hello, this is Dave.
Oh, good.
Hi Dave, this is Melissa with the North Andover Board of Selectmen. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. We were just calling you so you could do your public comment.
Okay, I'm ready right now?
We're ready.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate this. So just have a couple of things to say. First of all, David Brown, 35 Old Farm Road, North Andover. You guys hear me okay?
We
Yes.
can.
Okay, very good. I'm the chairman of the Trustees of Osgood Hill, and have a few things to remark about that. So first of all, we respectfully still request to be able to present our findings and recommendations at an upcoming select board meeting. Our belief is that there are alternatives to what was recommended by the long-term planning committee that you should consider, particularly in light of the fact that we have been carefully watching and studying this operation for over a year now. The current board has. Number two, as our report indicates, history has shown that the estate can be and was operating profitably as an event venue and historic building under its current operating model, that is, in non-COVID-19 times. We also believe that it could slowly build back up its retained earnings account. We further believe that the buildup could be accelerated once operations are at normal capacity if additional staff were added. And by the way, I'm making these remarks as the chairman of the Trustees of Osgood Hill. Number three, it seems unfair to saddle it with the burden of supporting the other buildings on the property under the same enterprise fund. The support of the other structures is something that must be dealt with regardless of what operating model is ultimately chosen. And in our report, you will find suggestions for fundraising to help with that needed capital. And number four, there's only two more. Town meeting voted in 2019 to maintain control of the estate and the surrounding properties. And as such, that expense needs to be borne somehow. But it seems unrealistic to make the event venue support the entire property. We don't believe that was ever the intent of the citizens of North Andover. And finally, I just want to note, as a committee, we've not yet met to discuss the findings that KP Law had with regard to our actual roles and responsibilities. But we will do so at our next meeting and have a response to that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chairman Brown.
Does that cover all our public?
That covers all of our public comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that springboards us into our governmental reports, and first is our COVID-19 update. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Board of Health Director Brian LaGrasse could not stay away, so I believe he's here with us as well, even though I did encourage him to stay home because he's been working nonstop. So I'm going to let him, Brian, if you're here, kind of
Yes,
it's like
yeah.
Oz, right?
Thank you.
Let us know. Why don't you get started and we'll go from there.
All right. Obviously, we've had this little bit of an outbreak situation going on the past couple weeks. We have seen it through from the peak to the drop. The town is essentially down to, even though it's a high number, approximately 52 active cases. And these numbers are just preliminary. We had a lot going on today and didn't get into the state websites and database to actually go through and pick out all the cases that are still active. As you know, they come on and off every single day, depending on their isolation period and if they've been tapped to another town or probable didn't become a positive, there's a lot that goes into it. So these are just preliminary, but 52 active cases in town, 33 are linked to Merrimack and 19 are non-Merrimack. We have a few isolated cases around town and a few family clusters at this point. I know we've talked in the past about the transmission of this disease, and indoor close contact settings is the highest rate of transmission. So that's when it goes through families or dorms in the case a couple weeks ago. Massachusetts in general had a caseload of 465 new cases today out of 11,000 tests, which is about a little higher than the normal or the rate we've been seeing for positive tests at a 1.1 positive test rate, which is up over the 0.8 that we've been seeing. We've seen the 0.8 positive test rate through the state since the beginning of September, and it started to creep up in the past couple of weeks. So you've seen a little uptick here in town as well. My colleagues have seen the same uptick as well around the region. Typically what we've seen is about a week to week and a half after Labor Day, they started to slowly creep up. And then we also got hit with the large outbreak at Merrimack. One interesting tidbit about the Merrimack outbreak is that it was 90% freshmen. There were 0 seniors and only 2 juniors that were also RAs that were positive tests. I mean, aside from some faculty, some staff, some vendors, and a couple of commuters, and then a couple of workers. So all in all, it's 90% freshmen. We have gone up to a 1.1% transmission rate, which is still really good considering where we started when it was a 30% transmission rate back in March and April. So those are just a rundown of the numbers. I'm here for any questions.
Yeah, Brian, quick
we are-
question, if I could ask. So you said
Sure.
there's 52 active cases, 33 linked to Merrimack, 19 not. So what happened to all those other cases that spawned up over at Merrimack when there was 100 cases there? Have those students all gone home, so they're no longer tracked by
No,
the town?
No, they get past their 10-day isolation period. So when I was talking earlier about cases come on and off every day, if you've got 5 cases come off today, but 3 cases come on, you're minus 2 cases. So every 10 days, cases we got 10 days ago are now dropping off, and they've gone through their 10-day isolation. They've gone through the course of the virus, and now they're released off isolation, go back out into the community.
So they're already off the
Correct.
isolation. Okay,
So
thank you.
just to give you an idea, on Thursday, we had 124 active cases. We're heading in the right trajectory because now we're down to 52, right? But those because people are now in recovery. So our active is down, but our recovered and out of isolation numbers are up. And then one other thing that I would just add is that it's really important when you're looking at data to look at it in the same time frame. So I've gotten a lot of calls over the last couple of days from people who are saying, Merrimack's dashboard says 63, and you're saying 93, who's right, right? And so Merrimack's looking at a week's worth of data. I'm looking at 2 weeks worth of data because it's the 2 weeks worth of data from the 13th to the 26th that had us go into the red designation, right? And so if you're comparing different time frames, it's going to be really confusing and you're not going to have good information. So when we went red on Wednesday, right, they based that on the 2-week period. And during that time, the town had 93 cases that were affiliated with Merrimack College and 16 cases not affiliated with the college. But that was during that time frame, and those numbers have obviously ebbed and flowed. And I think important thing to point out is that without the Merrimack College cases, the town would have had an incident rate of 3.8%, which would have made us a green community. It actually would have made us the only green community in the area, and I think that's a really important point, because while we are in the middle of this, and we may have done a really good job of keeping the cases isolated, we are surrounded by red communities right now with one yellow, Andover's yellow, everyone else is red. And so this is not the time, and Brian and I have been talking about this kind of a lot, this is not the time to stop practicing social distancing. This is not the time to stop wearing masks. This is the time, if anything, to ramp up, because we're seeing a big ramp up in the numbers. And we want to try to stop that now and not end up where we were last March. The red designation, Brian, do you want to talk about that and what that means as of today for some of our businesses, or do you want me to tackle that?
Okay, but before you get to that,
Yeah, it's up to you.
Oh, hold on, Brian.
one more question, Brian. So if we have
Sure.
52 active cases now,
Mm-hmm.
when does the designation get reevaluated? So would we still be, with 52 active cases, would we still be considered a red community, or would it be a yellow community?
We'd still be red. So it will be reevaluated on Wednesday, right? Every Wednesday, they reevaluate the map, but it's for a 2-week period,
Okay.
right? So now it will, instead of being from 9/13 to 9/26, it will be 9/20 to 10, whatever it ends up being, right? 10/4 or whatever. So what we know, or 10/3, what we know is that we had a lot of cases that were last week, right? And so those will flow into this week. So no matter what, we know we're going to have at least a 2-week red designation.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Sorry,
But-
Brian.
But
Okay.
just one more minute, but having said that, we have the red designation because in another community, there was the spike, but unfortunately, the address that it was written on, the college address is North Andover, we got the red designation.
Yes.
I just want people, it's somewhat confusing because everybody goes, well, I don't get it. It's not our town.
Right.
But the address for the whole college is our town.
Yeah, so the majority of the cases came out of the Monacan dorm, which is actually located in Andover. However, the college chooses the address to report, and the college uses its main address on Turnpike Street in North Andover on the labs. And so due to that, all of the cases are credited to North Andover.
Which
I
is-
am meeting with Andrew Flanagan on Wednesday to try to figure out if there's kind of a more strategic or fair way to do that moving forward. Because certainly it was very burdensome, not only on our red designation, right, which I mean is terrible in our numbers, but also on our team, right? So you somebody like Caroline and Brian who, put in 90 hours, because when you're doing these cases, you're not just contact tracing your positive cases, right? You're also reaching out to all of those people's contacts, and in this instance, it was throughout the state. So hopefully we can find more equitable way to handle this moving forward.
Well, I do appreciate that strategy of approaching Andover. We're not targeting them in our complaint. I mean, this goes back to the word arbitrary and the fact that the state policies don't take into account, borders aren't actually defined by walls and gates. I mean, they're pretty porous. I mean, you cross right into Andover and you don't necessarily see that sign that says welcome. And even if you did, that's not itself a barrier to the transmission of this disease. And so it's frustrating from a state, and I think this kind of bleeds into later in the agenda, but it seems like they probably should go hand in hand with this discussion. Our own letter to the governor and to the delegation as well, and speaking to our delegation at the legislative level, they all seem to be on board with the concept of advocating for just a more practical approach to how these numbers get counted. I mean, like you said, we would have been a green community, we were doing everything right. And this has not, can you clarify, because I know that you did a great job, you went and, you've spoken with our superintendent every single day, you're speaking to our school committee members. Is there an impact on our public education system by this, the Merrimack spike?
So the only impact, I would say that we're all hyper aware, right? It certainly made us all hyper aware of what's going on. The only impact I would say that really was impactful for the schools right now is sports related. And that was the decision that was made by the entire region, right? Because so many places were red, that they made a decision only really to move forward with, I think, golf and track, because they're one-person type sports. There has not been an impact on operations. We were able to continue in the hybrid model, but that's only because we were able to ascertain that these were a cluster, right? We worked very hard to make certain that it was a cluster in our contact tracing. I can tell you that sitting with Caroline, when I asked her how she knew a case was affiliated with Merrimack, is because she knew every single name, because she had done so much work with them. And so I think that, the team here should be credited with the fact that they did a really good job of tracking this, making sure it stayed a cluster, making sure that there was not transmission that we didn't know about yet, and making sure that the community was safe, because this could have been a very different conversation if things had gone in the other direction.
So the red designation, I mean, and even still, that's not really impacting school sports because it's more of the regional red.
Yes.
I mean, as you pointed out, Methuen, Lawrence, Haverhill have all gone red as well, right?
Yes, I understand your question now. So the red designation did not require us to do anything when it came to the schools, right? There was nothing that said, you're red, now you can't go to school, right? What they basically said to us was that we should consider much more, and my argument back would be then this should be the same thing with the phasing of phase 3, step 2. But you should be considering much more than just your numbers, right? You need to look at those numbers. Where did they come from? Are there clusters? In order to make a determination about whether school should happen or not. And that's what we did with the task force.
So transition, so that red, I mean, right there, you were able to apply it in a far more thoughtful way to how we administer public education. However, as far as the community and the businesses operating here, the red designation, so the Merrimack cluster, and by extension then the red designation, impacted our business operation, right? Because of the phase reopening. Can you elaborate and explain for the public to understand what that has meant for our business community?
Sure. So probably, I think, Monday of last week, in advance of the red designation, Governor Baker released that any community that was deemed to be not lower risk, so anybody who was red, basically could not move forward with step 2, phase 3. And so step 2, phase 3 was a limited number of sectors. It's not a huge amount of changes, but indoor performance venues could now permit to open at 50%. Outdoor performance venues could go to 50%. For arcades, indoor and outdoor recreation businesses, like trampoline parks, roller rinks, laser tag, they could go to 50%. Fitting rooms could be opened in all retail stores. In gyms, museums, libraries, driving and flight schools could go to 50%. And then additionally, and this is impactful even for us, it stayed at 25 for indoor gatherings. It stayed at 50 for private outdoor gatherings. But we would have been able to go from 50 to 100 for outdoor gatherings at event venues and in public settings. And so I could tell you in real life, right, that affects the Stevens estate,
Yeah.
because we have weddings we would have loved to have. Now we have to keep limited at 50. Even our Halloween event that we're having, which has been hugely successful, we could have sold more tickets, but we're unable to. Affects the Stevens Coolidge, affects Smolak, and many other outdoor gathering venues that would have liked to go to that 100 number. And so that's unfortunate. And I think the argument basically, and we could talk about the letter after, is that we were penalized based purely on data, and we're not the only ones that have this argument, right? Middleton's red because of the jail, right? I mean, there's other communities that are similarly being penalized due to clusters.
It's not just penalized, we have businesses that have already been struggling, as all of them are, and it's just really troubling. There's just such an unfairness to this process. For a community that was low in the green, now gets jumped up to red, and it's not even on our land. It's not even part of the town of North Andover. I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm not blaming anybody per se, but this has really got to be addressed. What if it happens again? And the thing that is so disappointing is, I think people were kind of getting this sense of freedom, and then we kind of got pushed back. I mean, what if you were a bride planning her wedding at the Stevens estate, and now you've got to tell 50 people you can't come? It's just very, very troubling, and I think and the other thing that concerns me a little bit about it, there's a false sense of security in a community that had a pretty significant outbreak. They would have certainly gone from yellow to red. However, the community where we didn't, we went from green to red. And that's just not good governance in the area of public health. It just isn't. Andover should be a little bit on guard, because many of these kids probably travel to downtown Andover or whatever, and took advantage of the restaurants and so forth and so on. It is really troubling. It's just one of those things, I guess, you learn when it happens if you are a community a school that borderlines two communities. But Middleton too is just, that's just crazy. That the whole community is going to be affected because what goes on in an enclosed jail.
I think, I mean, these aren't laws of nature. I mean, there were laws and rules established in Boston by people that can't adjust those rules. I mean, that's what's frustrating. It's why, I mean, I'm fully supportive of the letter that you drafted, and I think it's important to keep beating that drum. I mean, these aren't things that we inherited. These are things that were policies that were created truly like as we've been going. And I use the term we as a society, but I mean, I think most people understand this isn't the Board of Selectmen. These aren't even our state legislators who did this. This isn't town officials that did this as far as, our staff that, I mean, as we just heard, our health department has been working overtime to address what has been something that has largely been outside of our control because it's been happening on a campus that's actually in Andover. That is in Andover. I would say that would be my genuine complaint is that, where we have shouldered that burden, our health department has shouldered that burden that comes with having Merrimack's address be in North Andover, but the dormitory be in Andover. But my bigger frustration, I think, that we have to be forceful with the state is they have the ability to adjust this. They didn't have to, they didn't have to say our businesses are closed when they know that the cluster, the reason why we're out of the green zone is because there's this dormitory, not even physically in our community, with students that aren't going to those businesses in any way that is different than how they'd be going again to Andover or other communities' businesses. So, I mean, I appreciate that you're sitting down with Andrew Flanagan. I would say that as an individual selectman, I would never want to penalize that community either, because this is a cluster that is isolated, and we can attribute it to the fact that this is freshmen living in a dorm, which is what, again, it's a fairly contained bubble. And I don't want to see those small businesses harmed, because a lot of those small business owners live in North Andover too, and the region as a whole, we rely on the economic vitality of our neighbors as much as we do our own businesses. But I think that needs to be beaten, because this is not something that we just inherited or, oh, hey, it happens. Like, there are people up in Boston right now making these rules, and they made them when this pandemic came up 6 months ago, and these are people's livelihoods. They haven't given us a safety net. They aren't helping these businesses that haven't been able to open. They're not helping us with the Stevens Estate. Are we getting more aid from them as a result because we manage a public facility that we can't open? I mean, that's ridiculous. And I know you get this. I think that this is
to explain to the public who's very confused by it. And I think your letter addressed it well. I did put your letter on Facebook in the responses and some of the reactions. It was sort of like, almost like a light went on. I'm like, oh, is that why we're spiked? And people were surprised. But again, as Phil said, this isn't to necessarily blame anybody, but we do need people to help us fix it. Hopefully it never happens again. That would be the best fix of all, but being on this side, it's been frustrating. It really has. We have people who are counting on us to get them up and running and bring normalcy back to our community. And we've worked very hard. Congratulations to your staff and the Board of Health. I mean, to be in a low green surrounded by other communities that are struggling is a pretty big feat. And we should be congratulated but not punished with a red designation that's not even accurate in the true sense of the word. So
do we know how many businesses are actually impacted? I mean, so you read a few of those bullets. Some of them, do we have indoor arcades and things like that? We don't have, I don't know if we have any. But there are some, like the library that was impacted. I think you said a flight school. We have a flight school in town.
Yep.
There are others that would be
couple of them.
impacted.
The gyms will certainly be impacted.
That might be something we want
Could
to
you say
send
that again,
along with
Melissa?
the letter
I
as
couldn't
well,
hear you.
that,
Gyms,
that there are
gyms.
certain,
Okay.
The wine and so on.
there are certain, these are the businesses. It's not just, categories, but there's actual businesses that are associated with these categories, and this is the number of them that are being
You
impacted.
could print a list. Yeah, we can certainly print a list of all the gyms, museums. I mean, the fitting rooms, obviously, it's going to be every
Every
retail
store, yeah.
shop that has a fitting room. Yeah, we can certainly print a list to go along with the letter.
Merrimack's going to continue to be, obviously, in our community, and this may happen again. I know you've been talking with Merrimack a lot. Have they learned? Is there something that they've identified moving forward that they might change in their policies?
It's funny, so the other day when we were going back and forth, I'm like, what have we learned from this? Like, what can we say is going to be done differently? And so I know that they've restarted their education. I'm assuming, just like everybody else, right? We all kind of got used to what our new normal was and then started to get a little bit more comfortable, right? So they are restarting their education process. I don't know if you saw it today. They went out on, they have like a new social distancing thing they're doing on Twitter. They're going to continue their testing. I mean, the reason, to Merrimack's credit, the reason that they found this so quickly is because of their extensive testing program, right? If they hadn't been doing that testing so aggressively, they would not have caught this. And their very quick action by closing the Monacan dorm and sending everybody off actually probably saved us a lot of spread and trouble in the long run. And I will say that their plan was applauded by the state on the calls that we've had with them. And so they're going to be continuing their testing. What they're doing right now is that they tested everyone who remains on campus, and then so that, like, the people who did not go home, and then they're testing everyone as they return as well, so that they know they have a good baseline. They're trying to discourage people from leaving campus. That's their big thing right now, especially freshmen who have cars or don't have cars, but tend to go home to see their high school friends and their parents now more at the beginning of the school year than, as they go along. And so they're really working on discouraging people. One of the things that Brian and I have talked a lot about is that it would be very beneficial if they would relieve the freshmen of their cars entirely and just say, no cars. That's not something that they have committed to doing right now.
I don't want to say, oh, it's a punishment, right?
Right.
Like, you're telling us that 90% of those cases were freshmen. That's the new thing, freshmen having cars. Like, we didn't have cars when we were freshmen.
We have been ticketing, so we've been ticketing, and they've been doing hearings. And I do know that. So if we get a call to Merrimack or to Royal Crest for Merrimack students, and there is more than usually 8 people fit in that apartment, more than the 8 people, there's no masks, et cetera, no social distancing, the police come back, they give the complaint to the Board of Health, and Brian has been doing ticketing. And so we have been doing that and other enforcement. And I know the college has also been doing enforcement and having hearings for those students, and so that will continue. We've seen people come in and pay their tickets, so.
How many instances of ticketing has there already been?
Brian, you have any idea how many tickets we've written?
6 tickets so far.
Brian, are those to students living in buildings on Royal Crest that are entirely student occupied, or are they commingled with residents?
Nope, they're student apartments.
They're student apartments, but the student apartments are located in buildings that also include non-student residents.
Yes.
I mean, that right there, like
It's
this,
not
there's
good.
one thing to have that cluster,
That's not
but the
good.
fact that we're ticketing students that are living off campus in sanctioned housing by Merrimack, that are living alongside our neighbors that rely on us for public health enforcement is ridiculous.
Well,
Like, there shouldn't be one student that's not following those rules, and those students should be kicked off campus. It shouldn't be a ticket, because they're putting students,
And
those students
elderly.
are putting
Public.
our
And
residents at
elderly.
risk. But for all we know, there are people living in that building that are sending their kids to our public schools, where our kids are going to schools, our employees are working as teachers, or administrative staff or support staff. Like, that's ridiculous. And so if Merrimack wants to be treated as a contained bubble, then they should contain their student population and have a zero tolerance policy for those students that don't follow it. Especially those internally, okay, but if there are going to be students living off campus, there should be a zero tolerance policy.
So I did reach out to Royal Crest, as did, I think, people at Merrimack, to strongly suggest that Royal Crest reconsider so basically in the past, Royal Crest has said that they are unable to move their residents, and that's why people are commingled in, and they've signed leases with individual students rather than going through Merrimack. Merrimack doesn't want them to do that. They want them, from what they've told me, they want all of the students who go to Merrimack live at Royal Crest to sign a lease with Merrimack, not with Royal Crest, because then they have more teeth, right? Then they can evict them, which is what they do. When they are just regular residents, they don't have that metric. All they can do is go through like a normal kind of student type thing, but they can't evict them because they are members of Royal Crest. So I've reached out to Royal Crest and talked to them. And I
But
think
I'm
based
not
on
talking
our
about
call.
I mean, as a student, there's a student that is going to Merrimack, they get caught, they're in housing that isn't necessarily Merrimack owned.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a ticket on public file, then that school should have a zero tolerance policy. Schools eject, they expel students all the time for conduct that has nothing to do with the school, yet reflects poorly on the institution. Why can't we expect the same for Merrimack for these students?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know what they've done. I know that we've been ticketing. I don't know what the outcome of their hearings have been. And Brian, they haven't told us the outcome of any of their hearings, right?
I did not hear the outcome on the last set of hearings for the 6 students I just fined.
They haven't
But they
told us
were off-campus housing, they rented on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So Merrimack did not have, and that was one of the things we talked about, they did not have control over the lease. They were just commuter students.
I,
Right,
I,
they can-
I mean, I would say actually, by the way, any commuter student, I mean, if there's a commuter student showing poor judgment, I mean, it reflects poorly on that institution too. I mean, Merrimack, I mean, I know that you're saying the state applauded Merrimack, but I'll say like locally, perception is reality, and the perception is, damn, they really,
Mess things up.
yep, I guess that's a polite way to put it. And whether that's fair or not, it's irrelevant, it's perception that matters, and
Numbers like that are alarming, no matter where they are, so.
Speaking of that, so they have continued with their testing, and I believe you had said to me 1,600 tests altogether when this.
They did 1,600 tests in one day, and actually ended up being 2,250.
So when are those results in?
Those results are already all in, and we've
They're already all in,
yeah,
okay.
those numbers
so
are all
We
included.
were anticipating a pretty big spike
Those
from that.
are included in the 33, so we're not gonna
Yeah.
see, we're not gonna get surprised tomorrow when they
No,
post?
so everything from that mass testing has been completed. They are still testing 4,600 people every week. They're testing every single student and staff member every single week, on site.
And what about the ones that are living in Royal Crest? They would be tested because they're going to school?
Everybody, even
Okay.
commuters. If you're commuting from your house at home, you're still tested. So basically, the way that it works, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that it works, I thought I looked up, like he's up there. The way that it works is that basically,
Divine.
like, you would have your schedule, and it would be like biology, COVID test. Like, it's literally on your schedule, and you have to go and show up just like it's a math class.
Is their app, right?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
So, and with the tickets that Brian writes, so there's a fine,
Yes.
but there's also a follow-up hearing at Merrimack College. They're actually,
So we
Yes.
alert Merrimack, right, we've alerted Merrimack that we're ticketing them, and we sent them copies of the tickets, and then they did their own separate from us process. And all we heard was that there was gonna be hearings.
they should be sharing what happens there with us, just so we know. I mean, especially, are those kids testing positive? Are those kids, what is the results of those hearings? I mean, in normal
We
times, we
have
wouldn't
been
have to.
monitoring for all the students that we knew were at the parties, and so has Merrimack, regarding that particular incident. We have been monitoring those names to making sure they weren't linked to this particular cluster, and they weren't, thank God.
But we should know what their disciplinary actions are.
So I can ask the college, I'm not sure they're going to tell us that, to be honest with you. We certainly can put the request in and ask for there, but as a private entity, I'm not sure they're gonna tell us that.
But now, would Brian LaGrasse go to the hearing as sort of a police officer would at a court hearing to say whether or not this is what happened if the, you
So
know?
Brian doesn't actually see the party, right? So Brian, you just submit the copy of the ticket with the, report?
Yeah, I submitted the tickets to Merrimack just to copy them, let them know what we did. If they had any questions, to give us a call. But I was not invited to the hearings. I definitely would have gone if they did invite me.
Do you have to be invited, or can you just go?
No, so they're like private disciplinary hearings on campus, right? The only way I could think to equate this is like, if it's an employee, that was an employee issue in a private company, right? That's the only other way I could think to equate this. So it doesn't really have any, our privy is related to the ticket, right? We write the ticket. So it would be, I guess this is how the best way I can explain it. Somebody gets a DUI, right? Their business finds out about it. There's private disciplinary hearing that happens, right? All we deal with is the DUI ticket part of it. We don't hear what happens to the employee in their hearing, right? And so I'm not sure we ever would, I mean, I can certainly ask for it, but I don't think they're gonna give us that information.
But we would certainly know for repeat offenders, because Brian would have their name.
Yes, 100%. Yep.
Well, I
Yes.
guess, could we know their policy, though? Maybe not the disciplinary action for specific students, but what their policy will
they
be
would
if
do,
they
yeah.
receive a ticket from the town?
Yes, we can definitely ask for that.
Yeah, like 3
Yep.
strikes and you're out. kind
Yeah, it
of
makes
thing.
perfect sense.
Or
Or
one?
maybe
mean,
more.
I think it
Or
should-
maybe more, right?
So what requests do we have as a community dealing with an entity like Merrimack? I mean, obviously, there are certain, we can have conversations like this, and we can express our hopes, but, I mean, really, we're just a step above, a Facebook forum just chatting about this, right? I mean, that's what it feels like. I mean, do we have recourse as, the executive body of this community, or as town hall? Do we have the ability to work with them and require certain things? Or
So I
if
would
they
say
choose not to take certain action, do we have tools in our toolbox to be able then to be a little bit more strict about how we handle incidences with that population?
I would say it's probably the exact same tools we have when we ticketed those students, right? So if we find that Merrimack College is doing something that violates any of the executive orders that come from the governor, right? We have that same tool to write them tickets, daily tickets if we wanted to, right? Knowing that they were in violation. But we would have to have made a case that something they did, right, violated one of the governor's many, what are you on, 38, something, 43, many executive orders, and we'd have to tie it to that. Interestingly, when, this came up in other meetings, we talked about, is there anything we could have done with the Wanacue dorm? No, right? Andover would have had to do something. That's why this conversation with Andover is so important, because if we wanted to do
Fair.
enforcement on the Wanacue dorm, say we determined that there wasn't social distancing being followed in the Wanacue dorm, right? Let's say that people were not wearing their masks, and there was a gathering of more than 8, and we all know if it's a gathering of more of 8 not from the same household, they need to be wearing their masks. We couldn't have even written that ticket.
That's not included in this letter, for instance.
Yeah, that's
I mean, that's a really salient point right there. Like, you've just penalized us for something that we actually couldn't have prevented as a municipality, and not because we don't have clear. No, we could have watched it happening, and we would have had to sit there. Not that, by the way, this is not a slap at Andover, because Andover wouldn't have known either. But like, literally, we could have been there watching it happen, and it doesn't matter. We couldn't have even done anything. I mean, that right there, if that doesn't say that the policy developed up in Boston is broken, then are certainly in need of some serious adjustment, then I don't know what. Like, that's a really good point, Melissa, and I hadn't considered that.
I've been talking about it because it's really frustrating.
Well, we knew that it was in Andover, but I mean, the
but there
whole
was no
campus has been treated as
jurisdiction.
a single entity, but that point, like, we couldn't have done anything, and yet our health department, once it did become an issue, did have to step in, ironically. That's, sorry, beating that dead horse.
So I will ask Merrimack what their policy is for discipline, and share that answer with all of you. And we certainly can invite them to come to a future meeting to discuss COVID 2.0 and how their reopening plan may change based on kind of learning, right? And what they're gonna be doing differently moving forward. I don't think that's a terrible idea.
I think that's helpful because I think communication will help. I mean, I'm sure they're watching this meeting. If not, they're going to watch it tomorrow. And I think it's helpful given the repercussions that can come from a spike there. It would be helpful to have that line of communication open just regularly, at least until we're whatever beyond this looks like.
Right. And they have agreed, like I said before, they have agreed to start paying for staff to do our staff, not our staff in here, to do contact tracing and as public health nurse under Caroline. So that will be helpful.
So this was a clarifying point. So you said that they'll pay for staff to be just on the Merrimack campus, but that staff will be reportable to our
Yes.
internal staff. So that's important.
All here, all under Caroline, but they will pay for it because obviously it was overwhelming, right? Nobody would think we'd have that many cases at once. It was very overwhelming for Caroline and everyone. So they have agreed to do that, so that's great news.
That is actually getting something, because that's freeing up our staff, and they're paying for their own staff, so contrary to what Ms. Klein said, it is getting something.
Yeah, it's very helpful. Brian will tell you how excited we are about it, and we actually interviewed someone today, right, Brian? So.
Yeah, yes, we did.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to that.
So did we combine the two together?
We
So
certainly
I think what I hear consistently, we all feel it, is the great angst and concern about what went down at Merrimack and the repercussions of it. What is particularly interesting to me is what's transpired in the 2 weeks since then. And let's also recognize what has transpired in the 2 weeks since then. Is we've made a couple of requests of Merrimack to partner with us, which they have and are stepping up to that. But more importantly, from a health perspective, we have seen what would look like the manifestation of implementing a policy that is all about containment and about identifying where it came from the start. And we're presenting really to the state a case study here, right? I mean, my son just moved in 2 blocks from BU, and everybody's wearing masks around there, but, a breakout at BU in Boston would be radically different than a community like ours. And I think that's our opportunity to express this to the governor and say, this is why, not just because of we don't have jurisdictions over things, but we've actually shown that there's a process to identify, to track, and contain. And we have a track record now building a couple of weeks of that. And I think having Merrimack come here in another couple of weeks and really take us through what they've put into place over over this now month period, I think will be really important in also making our community feel comfortable that, yes, Phil, you're right, there are going to be some people, whether they're at Merrimack College or just in our community, who don't act responsibly. That's just a fact of life. But the more that we can contain that and identify a process for that and really see the impact of that is important. And to me, I keep coming back to the 14, 15, 16 cases in our community week after week after week. Tells you that that other piece that's spitting out there that's not Monacan Hall has not impacted our community, and that's what we really need to keep our eye on as much as anything else. So, I mean, I'd like to move, if we could combine, I think, the move out of order with the agenda, and let's just do the governor's letter, if that's acceptable to everybody else, but since we're on the
Makes
topic,
sense, yeah.
let's just pull it all together and do that.
Okay, so Chris had asked me to just, him and I had a intellectual debate about the best place to make your request.
Yeah.
So he's just asking that we make our request early on and then kind of repeat it at the end. So I just added the last graph that says, again, we respectfully request. I changed it, that we respectfully request. I changed that to, again, we respectfully request. And then I inserted a second graph that says, we are writing today to request. So it's in there twice, basically, but at least we lead with it, so they're not looking for what we want. And then I just added another line at the chair's request as well. It is in graph 4. And it says, today, the town of North Andover has 52 active cases with 33 cases affiliated with the college. Just so that they can understand kind of where we are today, since we're talking about data that is relatively old at this point.
Thank you.
That's on my Google Doc. I'll send it to you.
Now, this is coming from all of us, so I want to make sure that, you know, we as a board are comfortable that it covers what we want to say and the tone we want to say it in, so.
Well, I would like to add in, if we could, the number of businesses and government buildings that are impacted, like the library,
Yep.
which goes ahead and it continues to impact our citizenry because people have been waiting to try to get back into the library and other public buildings. I think it would be impactful to show what those are. I've already mentioned it, so I'm not
Yeah,
going to dwell
so-
on that.
That's a
I
good-
think that actually, though, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
This isn't an empty
Excellent.
letter where we're just squawking. There's an actual real reason why this is being
Yeah.
submitted, because people's lives have been impacted, and our own services, our ability to deliver services has been as well. So that's a really good
Excellent,
suggestion.
Jay.
So
I
the-
also think putting in the comment that it's not, honestly, it's not even fair to the people in Andover. They think they're in a safe yellow zone when in fact, on the outskirts of their community, they're popped red. So I think that's,
Are we gonna mention the piece that we didn't have jurisdiction over?
So, at the end of graph 5,
Mhm.
I'm just gonna add, and I'll have to look this up tomorrow, but there are XX businesses impacted by the higher risk designation. So that should fit in there, and then, so up here I see the cluster of Merrimack College, which originated in the Monacan dorm in Andover. I could say, the cluster of Merrimack College, which originated in the Monacan dorm in Andover, and is outside
Yeah.
of North Andover's jurisdiction.
Mhm.
Which legally or by fact or whatever is outside of it, just, it's not a claim,
It's
it's a,
just,
you're an
Is
attorney.
outside of North Andover's legal jurisdiction.
Dick, would you want those list of businesses actually in a addendum
Yeah, I'll text
to
you.
it?
Well, even just enumerate, just even giving some numbers. I mean, I don't know if we have to list them specifically one at a time. I mean, I'm sure that would be helpful, but even just saying, you know, we have X number of businesses that are directly impacted and
Mhm.
being held back because of this designation, and including the town services too, like, I'm assuming the senior center, right?
The senior center isn't open yet. The library definitely is, and the Stevens State would be impacted by these,
Okay, all right.
for sure.
by naming them, it gives a face to,
Yeah.
you know, it's not just,
Okay, I can attach, I'll get a list from the town clerk in the morning and I can attach it.
Thank you.
So do we want to say the cluster at Merrimack College, which originated in the Monacan Dorm in Andover and is outside North Andover's jurisdiction, caused the town's number to spike due to all of the cases being assigned to North Andover? Yes, okay.
Yep.
Good.
And I'm sorry, what was the last thing that you just said? No,
no, we were just talking about the businesses, like if you list them by name, it gives a face
so
to.
I'm gonna add that, okay.
Addenda.
But I thought I missed something that someone else said.
No, no, that was it.
Was it? Okay,
That's what we're talking
sorry.
about. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll have the town clerk run the list of businesses in the morning, and we'll attach it. All right, anything else?
Thank you.
No problem.
And you're going to copy our delegation, our state delegation on this?
Yep, we'll CC the state delegation and the lieutenant governor.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would move that the Board of Selectmen send the letter as discussed this evening to the governor regarding the rent designation and phasing as presented.
And I will second that.
Thank you. If there's any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Say
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Our first
Thank you.
non-roll call vote?
Quite a while.
Mr. Chair, are we all set with Brian? Did he go home?
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes.
No problem, thank you guys.
All right.
Anytime, you know that.
Thank
All right.
you.
Keep up the good work.
Yes.
All right,
He's
so,
amazing.
we have one piece of old business discussion regarding the Stevens Estate legal opinion. And we have somebody from KP Law that's going to join us to answer questions. Is that
No.
true?
We do.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the update on the master plan
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
You missed one.
Jump. So excited. Keep this whole thing. So, yes, we had a meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee on the 24th, and thank you to everybody who participated. It's a great group. We selected a chair, Kelly Cormier, who is on the planning board, and Stan Limpert, and with Andrew Shapiro and Gene Enright's tremendous help, we kind of took that monster spreadsheet and really started to work on figuring out what the priorities are for it, and really also a communication plan, because there were kind of there were two things that we saw happening. One is figuring out where to go, and also communicating how we're getting there, what the concerns are, how to have input in that. And when you kind of add in the Royal Crest possibility, which touches on so many pieces of that master plan implementation, it really kind of brought to light an idea which Vice Chair Limpert and Kelly Cormier put together, which is trying to set priorities, not just on cost, but time, breadth of impact to the community, and difficulty. And so we're all kind of working through the spreadsheet to try and figure out how that will come together, kind of what that cake will look like when you bake in all those considerations. And to that end, our next meeting, which will be later this month, I believe the 21st, we're going to sit down and try to come up with that kind of general prioritization and try and put that together in a report to this board, which we are going to do quarterly. So there will be an update from the Master Plan Implementation Committee each quarter as to what we're putting into place. So what you should expect from this committee, we hope to have it by the end of this month, is our first take at the rationale for what we see are the priorities, some of our thoughts around communication, and that gives us a starting point as a board also now to engage that discussion with the planning board and other committees in the community. So, as I said, I'm really excited that it's just such an awesome group. They really worked hard, and I can't thank Andrew and Gene enough. They put so much time and intellect behind it. It's just a massive project, but wow, where we're going to go as a community as we put this together, just something. So, and then part of that is the Stevens Estate. So let's move to that. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Sure.
We do have Attorney Reese with us, I believe.
Yes, I am here.
Okay, great, thank you. Hi, Mark, how are you?
Good, how are you this evening?
Good, thanks. All right, so as you know, we received an opinion about the Stevens estate, at our last meeting, and we voted to make it public, and then we invited Attorney Reese to answer any questions that the board may have about the opinion. So, he's here for us, if you have any questions you'd like to ask.
Might be helpful to just take a moment and summarize, in essence, what the opinion was. It was very detailed in researching it, but maybe town manager, if you could help us a moment with
Mark,
that.
do you want to just briefly summarize the conclusions?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to. First, I do want to offer an apology. I think the initial version of the report had some, due to, unfortunately, a spell check debacle, the spelling of Stevens Estate seemed to have gotten lost in the mix. So I hope that you have the corrected version. Of course, we know the correct name of the estate. I've been there a number of times myself as a North Andover resident. But this was a very interesting matter to review, dating back to 1994 when the property was first acquired. So it's obviously has quite a bit of a history, and it's important when you review matters of this type, of course, to carefully review each of the town meeting votes and bring those votes forward to see what the cumulative impact is of those votes. And town meeting obviously has a great deal of authority with respect to acquisition, use, and disposition of municipal property. Property is held by the town under Chapter 40, Section 3, the town being the town generally, not a specific board or officer in terms of the actual ownership of the property. But the care, custody, management, and control of that property is generally determined to fall to a specific board or officer. If that is not specified, then it falls to the Board of Selectmen as the town's chief executive authority, chief executive body. And in this case, the actions in 1994 under Articles 5 and 7 made clear the authorization to acquire what was then the Boston University Conference Center, and to authorize the disposition of certain properties in order to essentially recoup monies towards the repayment of the principal on the loan that was undertaken to purchase the property, and then clarification under Section 7 that authorized the selectmen to operate and maintain the conference center, to establish a legal entity to undertake the management and operation of the facility, and to include within this management operation the authority to lease or sell such facility. So back in 1994, the Board of Selectmen was given very broad authority to undertake the leasing and sale of property, including the conference center itself. Bringing this matter forward into 1990s, and I just to digress for a moment, I know that those articles, the motions under those articles were amended, and sometimes it becomes very difficult reading through what was done at town meeting on articles that are well thought out and motions that are well crafted, and then amendments that are made on the floor that can complicate the reading. But ultimately, the authority that we saw was clearly established in 1994. Then in 1997, town meeting authorized the Board of Selectmen to establish the Osgood Hill Trustees. And one of the duties of those trustees would be the oversight of the Stevens estate, again, including care management and fiscal oversight, with the trustees to develop a plan and a definitive plan ultimately that which plan might include the sale of the property, which was to be presented to town meeting in September of 1997 for final action. It's my understanding that ultimately an oral report was made to town meeting. There have been a number of recommendations and suggestions of what should be done with the property. And I know that there's a reuse committee that's in place right now. The trustees remain in place, but in our opinion, the duty of the trustees. Again, the trustees were the creation of the trustees was authorized in 1997 to be created by the Board of Selectmen themselves. So essentially, the trustees are answerable to the Board of Selectmen under the original May 1997 annual town meeting vote. And that vote did not clearly give these trustees independent authority to actually sell or lease the property. It gave care, management, and fiscal oversight through the Board of Selectmen to trustees appointed by the Board of Selectmen. So ultimately, in our opinion, the 1994 votes taken under Articles 5 and 7, which gave clear authority to the Board of Selectmen with respect to the then Boston University Conference Center, what is now known as the Stevens Estate, remains in effect. The subsequent votes and actions taken by town meeting did not result in the issuance of sale or lease authority to any other entity, and the Board of Selectmen retains that authority, of course, subject to appropriate planning and determinations by the Board of Selectmen. And without having transferred any of that authority, the Board of Selectmen, in my opinion, retains that authority. And I'm available to answer any further questions on this matter.
I appreciate the thorough work and research on this. A lot of references made to what happened 20, 25, almost 30 years ago. And so really going through it in detail, I think, is very illuminating. It sort of clarifies, but also, I think, also puts us in a position to be able to make choices moving ahead. So I appreciate it again. From the rest of my board here, any other thoughts or comments or questions for Mark while we have his expertise?
Do you have any comment on the towers that, cell towers that are leased? Do you have any comments on those, or?
Yeah, yes, thank you for that question. I know that a question had come up about the towers as well. I know there was a later town meeting vote taken that authorized the leasing of that property for telecommunications purposes. And as I'm sure you're aware, under Chapter 30B, Section 16, there's a specific process, that's the Uniform Procurement Act. There's a specific process for leasing of property, which would include the leasing for telecommunications purposes. In our opinion, it is likely based upon the 1994 vote that the selectmen already had the authority to undertake that leasing. But it's not uncommon for a specific use such as this for a Board of Selectmen to go back to town meeting and essentially get a confirmatory vote for that type of use. Under Chapter 40, Section 3, there is authority for the Board of Selectmen to lease buildings of the town for periods of up to 30 years, but here we're talking about the use of land for the construction of a tower. So that would have required an RFP process, depending on the value, and it would have required town meeting authorization to lease the property. Again, the 1994 vote was very broad. The later vote on the telecommunications leasing was a narrow vote, which I would essentially view as a confirmatory vote of the authority of the Board of Selectmen as granted in 1994.
Do you have any suggestions or any insight as to where the funds from the lease would they go into the enterprise, or would they go into the general fund?
Mark, she's referencing the question I forwarded you my response to. I believe she's referencing that. So a resident had asked me that question, and I had responded by sending her the copy of the DOR book on enterprise funds, where it states in the book that if you paid for the debt for the property with general fund, then any lease proceeds should go into the general fund. So Mark, I had forwarded you that as well, remember?
Yes, I did see that. Thank you, Town Manager. And I agree with that opinion. We have to keep in mind, an enterprise fund is created as an accounting mechanism, and there are restrictions on that. But again, the town incurred general obligation debt on the property, and the intent of the enterprise, or the intent of the leasing rather, was to recoup some of those costs. So I agree with the town manager's position that those funds don't necessarily go directly into the enterprise for operations of the enterprise, being the Stevens Estate, but instead would be appropriate to use towards paying down the debt obligation for the acquisition of the property itself.
As a member of the board at the time when we were paying out that debt, I concur with that opinion. It felt only fair and reasonable that if we're paying the debt, that we should get the income that would help support that debt. Because when the town voted for this many years ago, I was not on any board then, but I sat in that audience. We really didn't have the funds, but the town, or it probably wouldn't have been a high priority of funds, except for the town decided this property was valuable and important, and that's why it was purchased. But I do agree with your opinion in that of the town manager, that it was an appropriate use of those cell tower funds to go back into the general fund.
Thank you. I mean, I don't see the enterprise fund operation process as requiring to be paid through the leasing funds. The lease funds really seem much more appropriate towards repayment of the debt. Even back in 1994, when the vote was taken, there was specific language as to the sale of the undeveloped neighboring or adjoining pieces of the property for residential use in order to try to recoup the cost. It was very clear that, and very prudent of the Board of Selectmen at that time, to look to mechanisms to recoup what was an extraordinary expense for the town, albeit a great opportunity for the town to acquire a piece of property like that. But with an acquisition comes a great deal of cost, and that's a general obligation of the town. So using the lease payments to pay down that obligation is certainly appropriate, in my opinion.
Thank you.
One of the things that I had emailed to Attorney Reach was just making sure I wasn't reading the opinion right. And so I had said to him, so just so I understand, the Board of Selectmen has already received permission from town meeting to lease or sell this land. And he said, yes, back in the 1990s. So it's interesting that we did it again for the cell tower and then attempted again last year when we already had those permissions in place.
It's good to get that confirmation because there was some confusion last year. We at the board level, and myself in particular, referenced the fact that we allegedly already had that authority to go and lease the property, and that we were coming to town meeting in good faith, wanting to get guidance from them as voters. And there were some suggestions made that no, that wasn't the case from certain residents. So I appreciate you affirming that right. And again, I mean, it didn't change our position. We went there believing what you've confirmed, and still wanted to do it because we felt it was the appropriate thing to do and engage the town at that level. So thank you.
Yeah, Selectman Calagaro, I think that's a good way to sum it up, the good faith. And we see that a lot in municipalities, the interest of the Board of Selectmen in being answerable and transparent with its town meeting. And so you have, and as referenced earlier, we've got a vote from 1994, so it's quite a long time ago, but town meeting votes don't necessarily go stale, so to speak. So in this case, you have that authority, but it's very easy for that to be forgotten or misunderstood, and so it's not inappropriate for the Board of Selectmen to go out back and get what is essentially a confirmatory vote, so town meeting knows what is being done. It's prudent management, and it's a bit of transparency, but I think it really should be looked at as confirmatory given the broad authority that was given to the Board of Selectmen back in 1994.
But does the 2019 vote now negate that? So does it, when, the town meeting voted not to allow sale or lease of the building, does that negate that 1994 vote? Or is that still in standing?
I believe that was a specific motion, right, to lease to a specific party,
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Yeah, that was my understanding, if that was a specific effort. And it's very interesting to think about that. If you saw, in our opinion, we referenced Chapter 40, Section 15A, which deals with transfers of property. And generally what that means is if a property is held by a particular board or entity of the town for a specific municipal purpose, then it requires a transfer, a two-step process to transfer the property from that board or entity. And in this case, town meeting is one part of it, but it would require the Board of Selectmen, who has the care, custody, management, and control of that property for the purpose of historical preservation, and it's subject to a historical preservation restriction now, and allowing for the purpose of sale or leasing in the best interest of the town. It would require not only a vote at town meeting to transfer the property from that purpose to another purpose, but also a determination by the Board of Selectmen itself that the property is now surplus to its needs. So the Board of Selectmen does have authority, and I think that, you know, the intent to lease to a specific entity, you know, that's a good faith effort on the part of the town, but I don't think it negates the 1994 vote. And again, in my opinion, votes at town meeting don't necessarily go stale. You would have to actually rescind the action taken and take other action. And in this case, again, I think you'd be following the two-step process under Chapter 40, Section 15A.
Okay, thank you.
We good with this as a group? I think this helps also, I guess, set our moving forward with that RFP. And so, again, I appreciate the good counsel from you and KP Law, and we'll move forward at this point. So thank you again for your time, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I very much enjoyed being here.
Great. Take care.
Good night. Good night.
Night now.
And I,
Thank you, Mark.
All right. I'll hear a motion to move into licensing.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we move into licensing.
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? We're in licensing, 5-0.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So this evening, and prior to this evening, I did ask for the assistance from town council on a few points on this matter, because as you might have remembered remotely, I, had papers all over the place trying to figure out where do we begin. And our town council did send this afternoon, I just got a copy of it a little bit before this meeting, of her, just heard, actually, I should probably let her speak. That would be easier, but sort of a legal analysis of what we need to do going forward. Would that be appropriate to do it at this time, or open the public hearing first, or does it make a difference?
I don't think it makes a difference.
Okay.
Suzanne, do you want to come and sit in my place? Do you need a microphone?
Come on down, as they say, right?
Thank you, yes. I did, Selectman Smedili, the chairwoman, asked me to provide a legal opinion regarding the board's authority to impose particular conditions on a license application or an alcohol license. So the board does have specific authority to do that, to impose conditions on licenses. The one thing that's really important for the licensing commission to remember is that you're acting as licensing commissioners, and what you're acting on is what's before you in the public hearing process. So you have an application come in, and that application has to comply with Chapter 138. And then any public comment, any response to that is also before you. So you have the application requesting the hearing, you have any either comments in support of it or comments in opposition of that. And then on the basis of that, on the basis of what you have the authority to review, you make a determination. And so within the context of your public hearing that you've created the record, you can then say, in order to look and provide for the public safety and the need, that's your criteria as public safety need, for this alcohol license, we're going to say that it's appropriate to impose the following conditions, if it is appropriate, right? And those conditions have to comply with the law. So in this case, there was a question as to whether or not it was appropriate for the board to apply a condition that says that all the small bottles have to be kept behind a counter. Now, if you have your public hearing and in your record, there's some information before you that says that this is appropriate, this is to protect the neighborhood, if there's something that would give you an indication that this is a necessary requirement for the license, then you have that authority to do that, provided you can, it's based on the facts before you. And then the second question was whether or not you had the authority to limit the floor space from an all alcohol application for that licensed premises. And that again is you look at what's before you. Is there an objection to this license? Is it based on something to do with, would the condition of limiting the floor space meet any objection to the license? So it has to be related to the issues with regard to the license. And if there's support for the license, yes, we need this, and there's no indication before you that any type of limitation to the licensed premises is going to address any issues, then that's something, you know, that's what the board weighs. It's sort of the balancing test of what does your record look like, how are you going to meet those, the needs of the neighborhood, of the community. And so I keep going back to the same issue, is look at the record, what's before you, that's what we have to base it on. You can't, you make decisions based on the facts presented and your authority to look at public safety, look at public need, whether or not they meet the criteria of the statute, and make your decision on the basis of that. The other thing also is that we have regulations, right, that puts people on notice. This is what we have to do in order to comply with the law, in order to have our license. So we don't impose, you don't have the authority to impose or require things within the application that are not in the regulations, that people don't have notice of, because, you know, we're looking at things, is that fair? It's not really fair to an applicant. They provide their application, and then we say, oh, yeah, we need, you know, it's, you know, you need another document, you need another document. Well, if it's not in the regulations, they don't know what they are required. And I know there was some discussion as to whether or not people are required to provide floor plans. And since that isn't in our regulations, with regard to a license like this, the first matter before you, which is a change from a wine and beer to an all alcohol, then it's not something that we, unless it's addressing a concern in the record, it's not something that we would require, and it's not something as a part of the regulations. So we wouldn't make that necessarily a requirement for them. Does that make sense?
Does anybody have any questions?
So in essence, you're saying there's no specific prohibition about putting a limitation on it, but it does need to be related to the regulations and to the implementation of those. So in both directions.
To the regulations, the implementation of those, and also the facts before you.
Okay, good.
Okay, yeah.
And of course, we're also free to, in future, come back and look at our policies and our regulations as we did in previous years if we want to make
Right, and
changes going forward.
exactly, and
Yeah.
then that process is to provide public notice of the regulations, provide an opportunity for people to respond and get the public input, have notice of what the regulations are, adopt them. And then when somebody comes in to apply for the application, they're prepared and they know what the licensing commission's concerns are.
Good, thank you, appreciate that.
Okay, anybody else? Any questions?
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is it
Okay, so, having,
I get a question.
sure, of course.
Can you walk us through the process that we went to get to this additional license and what authorities were in place? So, you know, we went to town meeting, we went to the state, and what it happens along each one of those steps?
Okay, so the applicant requested special legislation from the state legislature to issue a license that exceeded the quota in North Andover. So North Andover had met its quota for all alcohol licenses. The applicant drafted the legislation. It's very typical to other special legislation that the town has for exceeding that quota, because there's also the legislation, the special legislation almost mirrors one that was issued for a property down on Route 114 in front of Berry Farms. And so the language states that it's an authorization for the licensing commission to issue a license for JMML at 220 Middlesex Street, right? And then it says if the building ceases or the business ceases to operate, that license could be transferred to somebody else, to another entity, but only for the same location in the same area. And so that special legislation came before the board prior to town meeting. The Board of Selectmen voted on that. That went to town meeting. Town meeting voted to approve that, to submit that to the state legislature. The state,
But our vote was just whether or not it wasn't a binding vote, it wasn't a vote it was just a vote whether or not we were favorable or unfavorable on it.
it was just a vote as to whether or not the special legislation could go forward to town meeting, whether you approved the special legislation as it was presented to town meeting. It wasn't, you weren't acting as the licensing commission, right? And you weren't stating, and since the special legislation specifically says the licensing commission in the town is authorized to issue the license, it's not a mandated, it wasn't mandated, it's not saying that, okay, now what we're doing is we're issuing a license through this special legislation, but it comes back to the licensing commission, and you have that authorization, but the applicant still has to meet the criteria under the law in order to have the commission issue the license.
And could have restrictions been placed on the license at that point before it went to the state? Like say, we talked about restrictions the last time we met. Could those restrictions have been included in the legislation that went, or the request that went to the state after town meeting?
So the special legislation was for the issuance of a license in excess of the quota, right? So it was very specific to that.
Right.
And you're asking whether or not you could get special legislation to exceed the quota, but only a,
But let's say at town meeting, let's say someone had made or someone had asked for an amendment to the article to add in this special conditions. Would that have been something that could have been done at town meeting and then passed on to the state?
so that would not only be special legislation that exceeded the quota, right? So there's one provision in chapter 138 that says that there's only a certain number of all alcohol licenses a town can issue based on its population. But then the question would be, would it also be special legislation to amend another section of 138 saying this is only an all alcohol license for a limited percentage of the licensed premises?
Yeah, I guess my question is, where does that belong? Does it belong with the state or with the licensing commission in the town?
So it belongs with the licensing commission in the town. It belongs before, based on the facts presented.
Yeah.
Right? Because what the special legislation said is, town, you're authorized to do, commission, you're authorized to issue this license on the basis of chapter 138, which that means the commission then looks at everything that's required under chapter 138, which is holding the public hearing, which is getting the public input and acting to the public need and the public safety and public concerns in its issuance of the license. And there's certain criteria that you have to meet in order to get, to be able to get the alcohol.
So the time,
license.
if you were to impose any conditions, the time to do it is at the time the license is issued.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And actually, there's case law on that, and that's what the court has said, is the time to put conditions on a license is when you're granting the license. Put them on the licensee, and that's when you have your conditions on the license.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that clarification. I think that's an important piece to appreciate, not just now, but moving forward as we get asked. I mean, this isn't the bless you. This isn't the first time that we've been asked to submit this type of legislation as a town meeting. And so understanding that it's simply just that ask. And we're performing the very task we're supposed to be doing right now.
Right now you are. And then there may be another way to look at that special legislation that comes before you as to whether or not whether you want to make special legislation that's specific to one location and one applicant. That's a issue we can look at another point in time.
When we put these restrictions on the licenses, does it carry when it gets sold?
Well, so when there's a sale and there's a change of manager, then that person would come in with the change of manager. And you would also have a public hearing and you would look at those issues.
Go through the same process again.
Right. And if there was no factual change whatsoever, then there would be no, most likely, I would say, right, based on the facts presented, there would be no reason for it to change. But there could also be a reason for it to change.
Well, we received public comment. That's a really good question, because public comment specifically asked about that from a resident that abuts. And so the answer is that, they are protected as a resident. Our discussion tonight doesn't mean that, the next person who runs it is just given carte blanche. You can do whatever you want. So that's important. good question to ask, and good clarification for that resident.
Right, so it's all gonna be, right,
Continually looked at by us if there was a
right.
transfer.
Each
Right,
time,
it keeps
each time.
occurring, yes.
Yeah, and this is very specific, because this is only, this special legislation is only towards this particular location. So, that's relatively unique, I think. Yeah. So it may be appropriate to open the public hearing at this point?
You do need to read
Okay.
a statement, Rosemary. Don't forget that big, long one that Laurie needs to read.
When she started to speak, I thought, gee, I probably should have started with that first. Hold on one moment. So it's just the one that we have at the top of the page, same one.
And pursuant to Governor Baker's,
Bring
yeah.
it to you, I'll bring it back to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
She'll need that back, because that's all over news.
Okay, all righty. So statement to be made by the chair prior to public hearing. Thank you, okay. Persuading to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A 18, and Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. These public hearings of the Licensing Commission are being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can listen to the hearing while in progress by tuning into Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26, or online at www.northandovercam.org. Members of the public attending these hearings virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for the public comment by completing the online form at www.northandoverma.gov/SB public comments, and that's plural. And I believe that's it. So I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Move that the Board of Selectmen, acting as the licensing commissioners, reopen the public hearing to receive comments regarding the application for amendments to the liquor license for JMML Enterprises, LLC DBA Mike's Liquor at 220 Middlesex Street.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. And do I need a roll call? Or we've already established I do not need to do that even in this section. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are open to a public hearing.
Okay, so here we go.
Here we go.
Okay, so we have one comment. It is from Jim Weffers on 70 Harold Street. Okay. This one is just saying that there was an error, so we'll pull that one out. Okay. This one is from Amy Trask. I'm just gonna read whether they're in support or not in support, and then if there's a question. Okay, so the one from Amy Trask, who lives on Waverly Road, is supporting the application. These are all attached to the agenda if anyone's interested in them. Gary Callip, and his address is not listed, but he also is in support of the application. Lauren Belmont. She lives on Middlesex Street, and she is supportive of the application. Natalie Giglio. She lives on Middlesex Street, and she is 100% supportive of the application. Tim Sullivan. He lives on Middlesex Street. He is supportive of the application. Oh God, I'm gonna butcher this poor man's last name. Tom Licciardo? Licciardello? I'm so sorry, Mr. Licciardello. I tried.
He's used to it.
I apologize. He does not have his address, but him and his wife Lynn are both supportive of the application. Let's see here. Okay, so Jim Weffers, I don't see his address, but his is more of a statement that is not, that is a question, so I'm going to read it.
He's on Harold Street.
Okay, Harold Street. So he says, seeking the change of, okay. Currently, we have 8 all-alcoholic licensed liquor stores in town, all located in a shopping mall, mini mall, or strip mall. Mickaloon's Package Store, Wine Connection, 114 Liquors, Cork Shop, Main Street Liquors, Butcher Boy, The Vineyard, and Den Wine and Spirits. Would that be correct? If so, would it be correct that Mike's Market would be the only all-alcoholic beverages establishment in town located in a dense residential neighborhood? It is a standalone building located on the busy intersection of Waverly and Middlesex near the Thompson School. I understand the interested party must make a living as a businessman, but my concern is for the neighborhood. The location already has a beer and wine license, and the lottery. Isn't that enough? Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts during these difficult times of COVID. Okay, I think he has another one.
There's one from Tracy Watson.
Okay, I got one more from Mr. Weffers. He sent two. The first one was from the last meeting. Thank you. Looking at the application of JMML Enterprises, DBA Mike Markets, for a full liquor license, I noticed a sketch of the layout of the store. Included in the layout is a section for small-sized spirits. Does that mean nips? Also, if there are restrictions on the license by licensing commissioners, what happens if the present owner sells his business? Do they still stand? So we just answered that. And then, okay, and then Tracy Watson. I just want to see here. Okay, this letter also supports the application. This one's a little bit more, gets into some concerns too. Do you want me to read this one in full? So it's not just letter of support. Okay. This letter comes after reviewing the frustration with last night's meeting concerning the liquor licensing of Mike's Market located on Waverly Road. Having served in this commission for 9 years, 4 of those years as its chairman, I cannot recall anything similar ever occurring regarding an already issued license. This business and its owners have followed all processes required. The voters of North Andover approved this change in license at town meeting. The state legislature ultimately also approved, and finally the governor signed off as well. I am confused as to why it now seems there is a problem or issue. If there were concerns regarding this license change, they should have been addressed at town meeting 2019, not after the entire process has been completed. If I recall correctly, I believe that 4 of the 5 current members of this board were also members at that time. And as I also recall, there was minimal, if any, questions or concerns raised by the board. Going back for a second bite of the apple at this late stage seems very unfair, and in truth very confusing to those of us looking outside in. It is my understanding that at this point, the only reason to deny this license change would be if the license holder is a felon, saturation of an area, or in too close proximity to a school. None of these reasons apply to the situation, and as a matter of fact, a liquor store down the road from Mike's Market has just recently closed. I would strongly encourage this commission to move forward promptly with the issuance of this license. And it just goes on with support. And I believe that is all of the public comments. I'm going to give my chair back to Suzanne because she's going to guide you through.
There was one, the previous one at the last public hearing as well.
Mr. Weffers?
Oh, was he on both of them?
Yeah,
I
he
thought it was
wrote
one
today
of
and
them.
last time.
I had a hard time hearing at that meeting.
Yeah, so yeah, I believe I got both of his.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. I think that's all of them. Thank you. And again, these are all linked right to the agenda.
So it's probably the next thing is if the applicant would like to address the board. Is the applicant?
Wouldn't it be his attorney?
His applicant or the attorney, his
Right.
attorney, yes.
Okay, so.
That would be appropriate at this point, probably for him to address the commission with any additional comments he might have in response to the public comments.
Is he on board, or?
This is Brian Vaughn. I'm on the line.
Thank you, Brian. This would be
Hi,
your.
how are you all doing?
We're doing fine. So this would be your opportunity to speak on behalf of your client's application.
Okay, first off, I would like to read into the record a statement from Meg and Mike Zanakis, who are our proprietors. As owners of Mike's Market, we take a lot of pride in the transformation that has taken place on the corner of Middlesex and Waverly. My husband Mike and I both grew up in the neighborhood, and we are thrilled to be part of the next chapter of this location. Our amazing customers have supported us during this extremely challenging year, and for that we are grateful. Our customers also overwhelmingly support our efforts to add spirits to the items we offer for sale. Last week we submitted to the town a scale drawing of where we intend to place the spirits within the store. As you will see, the proposal to convert shelving that is currently used for wine as a location to place the spirits. We also intend to put all sizes under 200 milliliters of spirits behind the counter, accessible only to our staff. Our goal for Mike's Market is that it will continue to be an asset to the neighborhood and to the town of North Andover for a long time. We appreciate the board's consideration. Meg and Mike Zanakis. So they just wanted me to read that statement. They appreciate all that you do. They appreciate their customers. And I think it actually echoes comments of this board as to how well they've run this business and what they've done in the neighborhood. Just a couple things I'd like to point out is if you can refer to the drawing that they provided, there is in fact an area that they've proposed behind the counter. They would be willing. They think it's based on your comments. I think it's a very reasonable restriction for this location to limit nips and the smaller under 200 milliliter bottles of spirits to be a more restricted area behind the counter. That would be acceptable to them. They do still have some trouble with having a specific restriction as to some percentage of floor area. And although they don't have any intention of changing their business model, they just, it's very troubling to limit your retail area to a specific percentage of sales. You never know what the future will hold and how business will evolve. So in that regard, they would appreciate if there was not a specific percentage limitation. They would be willing to entertain, coming back before you if something were to change materially, but they would really request that we don't have any specific limitation on the percentage. One of the issues that was discussed was the proximity to schools. We do think that there are other similarly situated liquor stores in town. Namely, we would say over on 125, where you've got a proximity to high school age children as well as middle school age children constantly walking across 125. And as opposed to the Thompson School, those aren't really the children for the most part that are going to be walking in here trying to sneak alcohol out. So they just don't want to be treated any differently than this board has treated other license holders in the past. That's just their request, at least. So with that, if you have any further questions of me, I'm happy to entertain them.
Any questions from the board?
No, appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Everybody all
good?
set with their questions? Okay, I guess that would mean I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing, and then the board will discuss. Does that make sense to everybody? It's kind of quiet. I know masks could be
Move- yeah,
confining.
Move that the Board of Selectmen, acting as the licensing commissioners, close the public hearing to receive comments regarding the application for amendments to the liquor license for JMML Enterprises LLC, DBA Mike's Mart, 220 Middlesex Street.
We have a motion to close the public hearing. Do we have a
Second.
second? We have a second, Selectman DiColigiero. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Go ahead, anyone have discussion?
Well, I appreciate the diagram that was submitted. It gives an idea of where the liquor is going to be stored. And I did go down and meet with Jim Zanakis in the store, and he showed me the exact same locations. So he was consistent with that. I think, I appreciate this, and I think it helps me understand where the liquor's gonna be stored and where it's gonna be made available to the public. So I think if this diagram is entered into a record, or is what we have, and if we can, you know, what I think I heard Attorney Vaughn say is if there's any material change in the storage of liquor, or they would come back to the board and address us with that. If that was, you know, what they were willing to do, then I think, you know, this diagram would be sufficient. And then if there is a change and they decide that they're going to wipe out 2 of the grocery shelves and stock those with just pure liquor, that they would come back to us and, you know, let us know their intentions. So we'd at least be able to, I don't know what we'd be able to do, but we'd at least be aware of it.
It will,
Also, I think by Suzanne telling us that if there is a transfer of this license, that the new owners would also have to come back to us to have that license issued again, and that would give us, so if it's someone coming in that we don't know as well as we know the family that's doing this, and we respect the family that's doing, I respect the family that's doing this, then I think that would give us an opportunity again to revisit the license. So, I mean, those are my thoughts. I think with the diagram and what I heard Attorney Vaughn say, that they would come back with us with any material change. I think they've met some of my concerns.
I agree with you. I'm particularly pleased to hear that they would be willing to come back and talk about any future plans. It's just a matter of professional courtesy, professionally and towards the people of North Andover and the town. So I greatly appreciate that they're sensitive to that. And at this particular time, they don't seem to have any plans other than what they've already discussed. And I think that's a fair thing to say. I think all of us, especially in these times right now, we just never know what we're faced up against with COVID and other things that it kind of, nothing is written in stone, so to speak, but it's nice to know that they're pledging to carry on to the best of their ability and come back if there's an issue that they need to address, so.
Well, and I also think it's important to go through this because the request was, and the town did approve it, but this is incrementally above what the town normally would allow. And so there's a little, I think, heightened awareness and sensitivity to that. So, you know, all are equal, but everybody remembers the last one in line. And so I think kind of going through this process, I think further ratifies the confidence that the town had in saying, okay, we will allow one more incrementally. And so I appreciate the extra effort that, you know, Mr. Zanakis and all his team put together here and bringing us aware of this. I think it's important, though, when somebody wants to go incrementally, that good faith is really critical, because that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah.
I think that, Selectman Valencourt, you made a good point about the transfer, and I think that was a concern regarding what the future of that site could hold. Should it be owned by somebody new that we're unfamiliar with? And I agree it is a good family. I'm more invested in the fact that the people running that shop actually live in that neighborhood. I mean, that's really, I mean, certainly, you know, they are a proven family, a family with a proven record of business ownership and responsible business ownership in the community. But the fact that they live in that neighborhood means that they're invested, I think, in that facility's solid execution with how they lay out that liquor. I think having our attorney here and explain, you know, the actual process, because as we certainly heard tonight from public comment, sometimes we do this for so long that we forget what the actual process is, which is exactly what we're following. The last discussion did prompt me to go back and look at when we as a board did end up voting for favorable action at town meeting, where we sat at this table and recommended that the town meeting take favorable action. And commentary was actually expressed that we wanted, and I believe the exact quote from Selectman Smedili, which I fully support, was keeping it out of reach of little hands, which I think that the moving of the nip bottles behind the counter reflect that sentiment that the board had, and I think the assumption that the board had that nips would be managed that way because that's typically how it's been done in North Andover with liquor, all liquor establishments. So I'm comfortable with this layout, and I fully expect that just their management of it will reflect the needs of that neighborhood because they live in that neighborhood anyways. So thank you, and again, I'm going to say thank you to Suzanne because having that clarification I think is really helpful as this board moves forward and reflects on licensing in general. So sometimes you need that reminder, and it was a helpful reminder to have.
And I concur that our town council made herself particularly available to me over the last few days, going over it. As we said at our last meeting, or particularly myself, it was a very complicated process, and people at home couldn't see, but there were stacks of paper, and one thing being moved out of line, it sort of, it was a little overwhelming at times. And I think Attorney Vaughn said, I think this would have been better in person, and he was absolutely right, because you can spread it out and we can see the reaction. So I very much appreciate the time that you gave me in preparing for this somewhat different application. So,
Yes, it is.
thank you.
The one thing I would like to clarify, and I know you haven't had a chance to speak, I didn't want to jump in too early, but with regard to the diagram that's provided, so when you're saying that you're comfortable with it, we're not attaching that as a condition to the license. Is that correct? Is that what you're, because I wouldn't recommend, I guess I would say that I wouldn't recommend attaching that particular plan
No, I don't think
to
it's
the
a
license?
condition, but I think based on what Attorney Vaughn said, that
Okay,
if there's any
that's good.
material change, so we at least have this as a reference.
Okay,
Say,
that's-
this is what,
That's fine, that's good. And that just makes it easier in terms of knowing what actually is granted and for enforcement purposes and everything else. I just wanted that clarification. Thank you. I didn't interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate the diagram. I think that, they've done good things in the neighborhood, and it's a great asset to the neighborhood, and I think that their willingness to work with us and review this and your help going through the process, and me being new, learning those processes is very helpful. So I think this is great.
Great.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? I will then entertain a motion. Would it be correct for them to lump all the requests in, or should they be done individually?
Just this application?
Just this application?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
but you know that there's a series of, change of ownership.
I do it all separately.
You would do it all separately?
Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
all right, very good.
Move that the Board of Selectmen acting as the licensing commissioners approve the application for amendments to the liquor license of JMML Enterprises LLC, DBA Mike's Market at 220 Middlesex Street.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. You want to keep going? Or does somebody else want to jump in?
For our next hearing?
there's no other motions for that particular one.
No, we're done.
So we do have to reopen
Gonna read
this
it.
public hearing, correct? This
Yep.
was not our, so last meeting, we only opened that single one. Okay.
Yeah, we never opened it. So the last one, we took up the business out on Salem Street, right?
No.
And then this one we had continued, and then the next one we never really opened.
Right, okay. So we need to move that the Board of Selectmen acting as licensing commissioners open the public hearing to receive comments regarding the application of SJ Enterprises for a package store license at 12 Massachusetts Ave.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay.
We have comments?
So we now have public hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess we move that the Board of
Do
Selectmen
you
act.
want to have the applicant
Oh,
make a
yes, please,
presentation?
please.
Or the applicant's attorney?
Oh, okay, if he has something to say.
Yep.
Brian? Anything for this?
Yep. Yeah, I'm still on the line, Brian Vaughn for Hampton. I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback, I apologize.
Did you want to speak to this, Brian?
Again, I'm having a really hard time hearing, you're getting a lot of feedback.
Did you want to speak to this applicant, this application?
This is the one
Yeah,
on,
I'm
Oh, Zoom meetings, huh?
While he's trying to get on, there was one public comment at the last, it's attached to the, it's on the very back of the agenda, back of the,
Maureen, is it in favor of the application?
yes, it's in favor of the application, it was read, it was part of the packet the last meeting, I believe it's at the end of the packet in this meeting too.
What is the name?
It is Arthur Richter.
Arthur Richter in favor. You came up lost, Brian.
So the board can review the application on the basis of the documents submitted. And I would, and the one public comment in favor of it, and then I think we'll have to move forward with just that if the.
And this is just
applicant-
for beer and wine, that's it?
Yes, and this is for Sam's Mobile Mart.
Yep.
12
Hi,
Mass.
this is Brian again, and the feedback seems to have stopped a little bit. I apologize for that. But I am representing Sam Amin. This is just a license request for just beer and wine. I did submit, in addition to the floor plan that had previously been submitted, knowing the issues that the board was interested in, we had them submit a floor plan with the proposed location as to where they intend to have the beer and wine in the existing store. Anticipating that it could be an issue, knowing that down the road they may intend to possibly install a separate cooler and move the wine rack over to the back left rear of the store as you're walking in. I included that just for your edification. I don't know if you had any questions about that.
anybody have any questions?
The clarity.
Okay. So we're going to close the public hearing? Sure.
Are we at the, have given out all our walkout beer and wine licenses to at this point? So this is what has to happen if one gets out, if one is released, then someone else can request it, so we don't have any left? Oh, okay, I didn't realize that. Okay. That answers that,
You're all
I'm good.
Okay.
I just didn't realize we had no more beer and wine licenses to give out for carry out.
Yeah, it seemed like we did have those for a while. There was always one available. Okay, anybody want to make a motion to close
Madam
the
Chair, I'll
public
make a
hearing?
motion, we close the hearing for a request, let me get there, for a beer and wine license. Hold on. At, I'm hacking this up, but at the Sam's Mobile on Mass Ave. SJ Enterprises, Inc., Sam, doing business at Sam Mobile, 12 Mass Ave.
Okay,
Second?
we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Are you ready to vote?
Madam Chair, I move the Board of Selectmen, acting as licensing commissioners, approve the application of SJ Enterprises for a package store license at 12 Massachusetts Ave.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Very good. Congratulations.
Do you want to give you a regular commentary about checking licenses in College Town? I mean,
Oh,
you do that
yeah.
very well.
Thank you. Well, for the new, not so much for the Zanakis family, because they've already heard that We take the sale of liquor very seriously in the town of North Andover, so that we would ask Attorney Vaughn, make sure that your client knows of all, all the rules and regulations, that they do check licenses. Out-of-state licenses do not count as a viable license for age, and if they do choose to use that, they do it, the owner of the establishment does it at their own peril. We ask that they remember that we do have a lot of college students in town with many out-of-state licenses, and we often suggest that they get one of those ID checkers. It would be looked more favorably on them if a false ID was checked even with an ID checker, and perhaps didn't pass as long as they don't look like they're 10. But we do take it very, very seriously. So if you could share with them, fair warning, this is their warning. So that's the tough conversation we have with a new licensee. Thank you for reminding me.
I appreciate it. I will definitely convey that to them. It should be noted that they've been doing business in this town for a very long time. I worked at that mobile station when I was in high school. That's a long time ago. And they, although they haven't sold alcohol in the past, and this is new to them, they're very reputable, good operators, and they are familiar with tobacco and such. So I will impress upon them the concerns of the board, and on their behalf, I thank you again.
Thank you, Brian. All set? Okay, great, thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is Stevens Coolidge Place application for one-day entertainment license for a market on October 18, 2020, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if you look in your,
This application is for a market. There has been some restrictions placed on the license, or some potential conditions placed on the license application. The most concerning one to me is that obviously the number of patrons needs to be limited to 50 people, and they say that they're expecting 400 between the hours of 10 and 3, and they also, just math-wise, they're going to have 14 to 15 vendors. They're allowed 2 per booth. So if you do the math there, that's 30 people just at the vendor tables. And so if we're going to allow this, I think that we do need to restrict to 20 people at a time visiting the market. And that we should require them to keep count of that. I don't know how else we would do that.
I would even go a step further. You really, it's less than 20 people, because if you have all the vendors there, you still need the people who operate it. Right, who oversee it, right, the function. So how many is, even if it only takes a couple.
I'm not sure how feasible this is.
Yeah, I mean, if there were 100 people, I could get it, but the other concern would be that you might have people queuing up. So that's the other part of it, which is, yeah, okay, but you now allow 10 people in at a time. Now you've got a line.
Well, you'd have to socially distance the line.
Well, right,
All the
so
way
that
down to
would
the
be, that's what
common.
I'm saying, is like.
Well, the North Andover Farmers Market has done it, right? That they've had to do the same thing, right? So
Okay.
they've had the same restrictions, so they've only could let so many people into the farmers
Yep.
market at a time. They had the vendors and everything, so it's not undoable. If people are willing to wait in the line to get into the market, then I think it can be done. You know, but of course, it has to be controlled on how many people are in there at any one time, and then, people have to be willing to wait to
Yep.
get in there.
And we can make that part of licensing.
Yeah.
for-
And
I will say this group has had similar events in other communities and executed it without issue. And so the number, I think, is based off of experiences they've had in Andover during the pandemic, by the way. So
Okay.
in Andover and Newburyport, and it's gone off without, in a negative way, without much fanfare.
Yeah.
I mean, there hasn't really been people who, there hasn't been any complaints as far as I could see, and it seems like on social media, they actually have a system in place, so, similar to how we already have the farmer's market. I mean, I don't know that I could have envisioned the farmer's market working as well as it did this season, but it gradually got there, and I think that the same is probably true for this group right here.
So I just think that we need, instead of number of patrons when we do the conditions, that I think we need to say total number of people on premises cannot exceed 50 or something, because the way that we have written here is number of patrons, which isn't really the case, right? So I just want to make sure that we encompass that restriction correctly,
Number of people, including vendors.
including vendors and staff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So they have a big property, right? I mean, their property's huge. So if they had different sections of their property set up, would that qualify? So let's say they have 1 acre over here that they have certain vendors, and then they have another acre over here that they have certain vendors, and they have the back acre, they have certain vendors. Or is it just
Yeah,
the
it's not,
property?
unfortunately not the way the law is written. And I think that they're actually, in some ways, because of the way their property, which is a very positive thing for the neighbors, because of the way their property is contained, right? It's got almost like walls. It's more of a contained outdoor space than it is an open outdoor space, which kind of further restricts them in some ways. But there's no allowance in the law for like sections of outdoor space, unfortunately, which is interesting.
That is unfortunate, because, we have some pretty big outdoor spaces
Yeah.
where people can very easily set up. If those were 2 different properties, then they could potentially, if there was a fence right down the middle, they could probably have more people there, because they would be considered 2 different locations. I mean, it's such a big piece of property, it's unfortunate that they can't
Right.
utilize the size and still be social and be safe. But I understand the law is the law, so we have to abide
Yeah.
by the law.
It's just defined, it's defined as event venue, right? So it's not, it doesn't contemplate something like that, unfortunately.
The farms are different, right?
Farms have a separate restriction. Yes, they have a separate exemption, which we've actually talked to the state about. So they fall under a different exemption.
The
for
farmer's
agriculture.
markets too? Oh, I'm
Like
sorry, the
actual
farm-
Actual
farm-
farms,
actual
she's thinking,
farms,
yeah.
And we can't overrule whatever the state regulations, I mean, that's the whole issue, that was the first half of this meeting this evening, is that
Right, I
we
wish we
cannot
could,
overrule.
right.
And so I guess,
Nothing will change for numbers between
Not
now
by
and
the
then.
18th,
Not
because
too-
it's the
too
18th,
soon. I
yeah.
didn't think so, but I thought I'd ask.
Right, so we would have to have, unless the governor allows our change, we would have to have 3 weeks in a row of not being read, so that won't happen by the 18th. One thing that we could do, I think, is you could allow the license with the conditions, and say that if any changes are made to the law, that you give, so for instance, I don't know, me or Brian permission to extend the numbers based on the changes at the state level. So that way we could flex a little bit, in case, for instance, the governor does make a change to the order based on.
He likes our
Based on
letter.
the
He
letter.
agrees
Feedback.
with our letter.
You never know, right?
never know.
couldn't we
just-
simply say that we approve the license contingent on whatever the state regulations
Yeah,
are? And
that's what I
so, I mean, just like we don't debate whether or not this event is gonna allow, 20 and 19-year-olds to drink, at liquor licenses that we approve, I
Yeah.
mean, we would be completely fine with them holding this event under normal
Following all the state.
circumstances, but the state has, and, we haven't developed any special rules,
No,
in excess of the state, so
perfect.
I would say allow them to, I would motion that we approve this license, as long as they follow all applicable state policies and protocols.
At
The
the
end of
time.
the-
At the time of the event.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds
And
like
in
a-
compliance with
sounds
the
like a good
conditions set
motion.
by the fire department and police department, because they have some traffic stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so was that your motion?
Yes.
Do we have a second to
I'll
that?
second that.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Very good.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, we move out of licensing?
We have a motion to move out of licensing. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Mr.
Aye.
Chair,
Okay, back to new business.
much better than the last one.
Okay, well, we're on governor's orders. Discussion and vote to extend the temporary outdoor dining permits per the governor's September 10th, 2020 order.
So if you remember correctly, we were lucky enough to quickly vote in some outdoor dining for the town. The governor has allowed us to extend that deadline to November 1st, and so we're just asking you to do that. People will continue to be able to eat outside under these temporary order through November 1st. I would ask people if they are planning on using heaters in their tent to please get in touch with the fire department before doing that.
And also, I've seen in some communities creativity as to what outside and inside and tents are and so forth. So might suggest kind of a reinforcement of that, but this is what constitutes
Yes.
enclosed and open, so.
Yeah, 4 sides down is,
Based on the governor's guidelines, right?
Yeah.
So we shouldn't have to define that. It's already
Right.
defined by the governor.
yeah,
right?
we have in our own policy definitions and explanations of what is and is not allowed.
It's just
Okay.
prompting people a little bit, you know.
Is it 3 sides or 4 sides down?
If you have 4 sides down, it becomes building,
Of course.
right, until it gets away from the outdoor dining.
But the one side, all I need is one side up?
Move that up. But again, when you got inspected by the fire and building department, they will have told you basically what is allowed with your tents specifically based on the fire and building code, is it, because some of them are different, so.
Right.
The businesses should go with what, they were informed by them.
Okay. So I'll hear a motion if there's no other discussion.
I move that the Board of Selectmen extend all outdoor dining permits until 60 days after the governor declares an end to the state of emergency.
And I will second that.
All right. And any more discussion? Otherwise, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passes 5-0. Okay, we already did number B. Vote on our fiscal '22 goals and liaison assignments. We had a really good session last Monday up at the Stevens Estate, and the weather was quite cooperative. We even had 2 unscheduled attendees. They were deers, but at least there were somebody watching us. And really a great and ranging discussion. So I really appreciate Melissa, you and Lori really working the spreadsheet to put that together, kind of congeal that. So let me just kind of open up the floor to this. It's attached in our packet here.
So we do have the document put together. It does encompass what all of the goals are, as well as the deliverables for this year. So as everyone remembers from last year, what we went ahead and did was we created tangent and achievable deliverables so that we had our goals, which some of them are very big, kind of smarter down to things that we actually could accomplish in 1 year, so they don't become overwhelming, because sometimes things become overwhelming, people tend just not to do them, and we don't want to see that. So one of the things that we do need to do tonight, besides make sure this is what everybody wanted, is to go ahead and assign our select board leads for these as well. So did anyone have any questions or concerns on the document?
So it includes everybody's feedback in terms of the goals, the components. I think rating or the priority, I think there's general consensus on that.
Okay, so do we want to run through the leads then?
Yep, let's just run through them. So
Okay, so who wants to be the lead for the fiscal discipline and the AAA bond rating?
I'll take that. I'm the finance guy.
The lead for the collaboration with the schools for the capital and fiscal needs?
I'd be interested.
Okay. The continued revitalization of downtown?
I'd like that one.
Okay, so this one's a little bit interesting. So, for this, working with developers to mitigate the burdens of large developments, what I'm really looking for here is either 2 or 3 people, depending on what we decide. 1, to work really on the zoning, because the zoning for Royal Crest is gonna be a huge lift this year for us to work on, and the other person to work on the development agreement.
I would be interested in this committee.
For the zoning or the development agreement part of it? I'd like to split it up, because I just think it's gonna be a lot of work.
Yeah.
And there is 2 members of the planning board working on the zoning, so I think it could be a good idea to have 2 of you working on the zoning as
Yeah.
well.
I would be interested in the development agreement.
Anybody else?
Laura, did you want to take the zoning piece of it? I mean, I'll take it if
Yeah.
you know.
We
I know we had
don't
that
do a
brief
ton of
discussion.
zoning, like we do, I'm more construction side, so if you are comfortable with that, go right
Okay,
ahead.
yeah, I'll take the zoning lead.
But it doesn't mean that we can't have input. I
No,
actually-
we
No,
certainly
of course
should.
not.
It's
Yeah,
just the
because I
person who's
spoke
gonna
to
be
you
at the
about a
table.
couple of things
Yep.
today, I think it was, or
Yeah,
a
just
couple of
person at
days
the
ago.
table. Yes, 100%.
Okay.
The sign bylaw,
I'll take that one.
okay, continued investment in sidewalk maintenance and expansion,
I'll do that.
okay. The cellular gap, so what we're gonna do this year is focus on alternative technology as well as, looking at town properties available for RFP.
I'm fine with that.
The next one is to explore pilots with Merrimack College, Brooks
Mr. Chair.
School, and review the pilot with the North Andover Housing Authority.
I'd like to do that, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please.
That was a popular
Okay.
one at the last meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Resolve issues with the rec complex.
I'd also like that one.
All right.
Facilities master plan 2.
I'd be interested in that.
Nope, it just so happened like that, that was a little gap right there in the middle, that I was like, I'm interested in those three. Rest to Laura.
Municipal vulnerability preparedness planning.
I would be interested in that.
Okay. The finalizing and implementation of the new org chart and job descriptions.
If nobody takes it, I will take that. I've asked for that. We've talked about that a few times,
Yeah.
just to make it.
It's almost done, so close. Continue to keep up with technology upgrades and security.
I'd like that one. That's usually my goal
I was
every
gonna say,
year.
Dick, that one's usually
One of
you.
my goals.
You can
It's
have
about
that
time
one.
you kind of expand your portfolio
Yeah.
on there.
Yeah.
Implementation of board strategy for the Stevens Estate.
I'm fine with that.
Update of the 1987, oh, sorry, commencement of the Diversity Commission.
I can do that.
Update of the 1987 watershed plan. Can everybody come at once?
I'd like that one.
All right.
I'm close to the watershed. I'm in the watershed.
There you go.
Development of the economic development website.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. The intermunicipal agreement with water.
Oh, we skipped to
Oh, we
40B.
Oh, I missed one. I'm sorry. Review and make progress towards 40B. Continue collaboration with the Affordable Housing Trust.
I would be interested in that one.
Well, I'm on the AHT also,
Oh, yeah.
so I guess that will put two
Do you
of
want
us.
for both of you?
Yeah.
Right, and having said that, the one on the Stevens Estate, I'm hoping that I could, as I'm on that committee already, I would hope that I could sit in at least on one
Oh,
of those
please.
meetings.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. The intermunicipal agreement for water. It's another fancy one. I know.
Who's the
Well, since I'm in the watershed
Yes, yes.
plan, I'll take
All
it.
right, Dick.
Since you're already in the
Water guy.
watershed.
And the Route 114 improvements and economic development.
You want it?
We can do it together, it's fine.
Yeah, we'll do it together.
Alright.
That's-
Okay.
yeah.
All right, there we go. All right, we will update these, but do you want to vote to adopt them? Are there any other? It was Chris and Laura.
Laura, yeah.
I wrote them down too, Laura. You're the best.
'Cause it'll be a
I
lot.
think I signed up for something.
Mr. Chair.
Well, you know what, I'll send it to you all, and if we need to do some
We
horse
can always
trading, we
horse
can.
trade, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Horse trading's allowed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Selectmen appoint the Board of Selectmen leads as discussed, with the option to revisit should anything have been copied incorrectly or anybody had second thoughts.
Got that all?
Yep.
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passes
Thank you.
5-0. Great.
That's great.
All right, getting progress here. Well, we're talking about good things with town manager's evaluation. And again, this is, one of the most pleasurable things that you can do. It's really fun sitting here as the chair and kind of hearing the rest of the board kind of put this all together. And we're all on the same wavelength. Just, Melissa, you've just been tremendous to our community. And, the numbers, obviously relate to that, but it's really kind of the feeling that we have across the community. And you walked into a tough enough situation in terms of kind of where we were and following quite the act. And at the same time, we throw this new twist, and the way you've really marshaled our resources, really got our town working together, it's just been phenomenal. And the comments and the narrative that all of you wrote really speak to that. And I would just say to folks, that's not always an exciting thing to read somebody's performance evaluation, but if you really want to know where our community is and where we're going and why we're going this way, read Melissa's performance review. You'll understand, so thank you.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been an interesting year, and I'm only this good because of the amazing team I have, so I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to
Yeah,
make
please.
a comment. You know, of course, we all know that our Madam Town Manager came in, and right out of the gate, it was boom. It was incoming on things that were not in her control. But I will tell you, I've never been more pleased with how aggressively she handled this, not even knowing all the players in town yet, and how pulled everybody together and did an absolutely fabulous job under the most trying of circumstances. Never a complaint, always a smile. Don't worry about it, we'll get it done. And, you know, a week or two later, it was done. So we can see how much you put into this, along with your staff. You know, you've got everybody working with you, all going in the same direction, but still listening to their ideas and comments. And I'll tell you, that it was a very big year for you, and you took it along with staff, and you ran with it, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Really proud of the job you did under the most difficult circumstances, and you had all your staff right there, just right there. Two of your greatest are right here in this room with us. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think I'd pivot off that and say that we naturally, we all live in this community, and a lot of the members of your team live in this community, and to hear what they say about you behind your back is really amazing, because normally, right, that's not always the case, that such positive things are always said to your face and not always the case behind your back. And the respect that you have very quickly earned from the people that you rely on, I think says a lot about you, because of course we as community volunteers aren't in this building every day. In fact, this is the first time I think most of us have been in this building in quite some time, and so I think that's an amazing reflection on you. I think the fact that we weren't yet and still are not fully recovered from the Columbia gas disaster, and then we're thrown this pandemic, plus you're learning the layout of this community, and managed to continue to build meaningful relationships and trust with people that I think you need to have invested in the proper management of this building and our community. So kudos to you. I think that's not easily earned, and you've earned it. And so, good job. And then even our most, unique of town meetings where we were outside, I think that, I often reflect on our last town manager and feel like he did a very good job of earning the trust of our community at a pretty pivotal town meeting. And I think that, again, you set that bar with your performance at this last town meeting, whether it was our budget and the pretty complex discussion we had to have in a very unique setting, but then also the pretty unique but important TIF that we had to have negotiated with Amazon in order to get the Lucent facility back up and working, which is something this board has really set as a priority for a number of years. And it was a fragile process that was really all put on you at a time where you were still learning basics, right? Because again, you were new to this community. So all in all, it's been a real pleasure working with you, and I'm grateful that you chose us when you applied, and that we had the opportunity to work with you this past year and hopefully many more years to come.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just echo a lot of those comments. I mean, I had the pleasure of working with you as the chair when you first came in, and pretty much for that whole first year. And I think, your availability, your professionalism, just, outstanding. And I think, I said it in some of my comments, I think the way you've elevated the staff around you as well. You've given staff more responsibilities, you've given them more visibility, you've allowed them to flourish and really do well around you, which is amazing. That's the sign of a great leader that can take their people and lift them up around them as well. So I really appreciate that. And again, I think everyone might have said this, you came in at a time that was just like totally ridiculous with so many things going on between, finishing up on, with the gas situation and, immediately jumping into Amazon and things around the senior center and of course COVID, and you're out of the blocks thinking in your way of approaching things, and the almost crisis we had going to town meeting with a recommendation from the school committee and thinking of an out of the box solution for that as well. I mean, it's just been outstanding. So, we just can't say enough, and I think everyone on the board reflected it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Auntie, Steph, everyone around,
Very
you know,
lucky.
like I said.
It's been great. This is completely new to me, and I think you've always been available and helping me kind of get up to speed, and I really appreciate that. And you are always available and always willing to go through things, and you know, the staff is always available you've really taken North Andover's goals and vision and to heart, and really moving our town in a great direction. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you, thank you. It's really been my honor to work here, so thank you, I appreciate it.
I can see that. So let's make it official. Just need a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that the Board of Selectmen approve the annual performance evaluation of the town manager, Melissa Murphy Rodriguez.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. No nays? Passed unanimously. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a request of James Doucette to use Milk, Johnson, Rhea, and Chestnut Streets on November 1st, 2020, starting at 9:30 a.m. Now, this is to hold their annual roller ski race. And there's some comments from our health director, again, consistent with state guidelines.
This was new to me. I had to go into Laura's office and ask her what a roller ski is. But I was quickly educated. So Brian has just suggested that perhaps they think about, you know, obviously, this is its own another interesting thing where they can have 50 people, but that has to include the spectators, right? And so it's kind of this weird event. So he's just suggesting that perhaps they think about staggering start times. That may be one way to alleviate the concerns about the number of people. And so, yes, I think we could probably follow the same ruling as last time.
I thought those comments were good, and I do just think, though, that, you know, there will be people around watching this too, and so it's that little bit of the congregating piece that's a little nervy at the starting line and so forth. So I would say my general sense is that there needs to be a little bit of discussion behind the scenes about managing that. Because if we're going to entrust them in this, it's really not just the race, it's people congregating, coming, watching it.
So I can reach out to them tomorrow and kind of go over what our expectations would be as far as the number of people, and Brian and I can talk to them about some plans that they could have in order to spread people out more, and we can go from there.
Yeah, he kind of outlines it in his letter too,
Yeah.
saying he would stagger the start every 15
Right.
to 30 seconds.
Which I think is smart, yeah.
But again, it's sort of like, but when people finish and are getting ready to go and that sort of thing, they're just family, friends, they're just, start of any race, it's really hard to separate people. It just,
Especially at the end when they come across.
yeah, everybody wants to,
Everybody wants to give them a hug.
yeah, do all that. I guess with those provisos, are there any other thoughts that folks have about this? Are we ready to give them this opportunity?
I'm trying to find
So I move that the Board of Selectmen approve the request of James Doucette for the use of Milk, Johnson, Ray, and Chestnut Streets for a roller ski race on November 1st, 2020, starting at 9:30 a.m., subject to the compliance with the governor's order pertaining to outdoor gatherings and the event having a staggered start.
I will second that.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, I'll just take a vote. All in favor? Aye. Okay, approved unanimously. Thank you again, Melissa, for putting a little extra time in this one, just you extra careful. Okay, with all that, hey, why not a little bit more on your shoulders?
So, as you may know, the governor did pass an executive order related to remote learning. And so basically, this is for remote learning enrichment programs that are being operated out of a place that is not typically a school, right? And so across the state, we've seen these pop up in like dancing schools, lacrosse studios, et cetera. And so our job basically is to allow exemptions for these to operate without having to fall under school guidelines, right? Because you're not going to have those same metrics that are in place that keep a school safe as you would in some of these places that really are more for assembly or, you know, lacrosse, right? So we have an application, thankfully, Tulare, that was up right now, where people can come in and they can apply, and it does require the fire department, the board of health, and the building inspector to go out and do an inspection, make sure things are safe, make sure they're practicing social distancing and wearing masks, et cetera, that there's fire alarms and exits and everything else. The final part of that is me signing off on it, and we're just asking you to make me the municipal approving authority for these applications.
So this takes us out of really the school having to go through this process, move it to municipal level.
Yes, that is what that was what the governor's intent of the order was so that the municipality would take on looking at these exemptions, these programs, and deeming that they're not in fact schools, that they're operating under a separate order.
So we can move faster and more choices and so
Yes.
forth. Okay.
And it's really supposed to be an assistance, and you know, a lot of people are struggling with remote learning, or parents are
Yep.
working, and this gives people more options on places that they can go.
Good. And how did, just kind of a curious question, so how, once a place gets approved, how does that get out? How is that known? How does that work?
So the state is supposed to be keeping a list of approved places so in each community. Right now, that list just says pending, because I believe that most places have not gone through the process yet. And so they would be added to that list. We did send out information on this morning about the application being available. We have already received calls about this, so I anticipate that we'll have as many as 4 added to that list very shortly.
Okay, good.
Is there a time frame that is it just during this time
Yeah,
period?
so it's just during COVID, during the
During
remote
COVID.
learning portion of it, right. And after that, they'd go back to their regular use.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Board of Selectmen appoint Melissa Murphy Rodriguez as the municipal approving authority for remote learning enrichment program applications.
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? Then I'll have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously, 5-0. Okay. Appointments. We've got a number of subcommittee appointments, so appointment subcommittee, please.
So we have 4 appointments this evening. We have Anthony Capichetti, who the committee is recommending appointment to the Conservation Commission open seat. We have Rick Green, who we're recommending be appointed to the open seat on the Community Preservation Committee to occupy one of the selectmen, obviously, appointed seats. We have Wendy Smith, who we're recommending be appointed to the Cultural Council, and Jason O'Toole, a published poet, requesting to be appointed to the Poet Laureate Committee, who we are moving forward. So, a lot of interested people in getting involved in the community. I think Laura and I spent many, many evenings on this back patio having in-person outdoor meetings. So our last meeting, seeing deer was nothing unusual for us because we've seen all sorts of wildlife that hang out behind Town Hall, possums and everything.
Possums,
Oh, there are
Yeah,
possums.
possums.
You don't
There are-
know what it is at first. You're like, that's the biggest something else that you've ever seen in your
Yep.
life, because that's what they look like.
They do, you're right.
Well, that's, that's also
I don't want to scare
encouraging.
people by using the word, but you know what the word I would be using is
Yeah.
that long tail.
Thing, yeah. Well, it's great to see that even, in this environment, that people still want to participate. There's a lot of things that are going on either behind the scenes or we're trying to put together, whether it be cultural or figuring out how to preserve our community. So that's really great that folks are stepping up, and I appreciate your time. I know what it's like. Great. So, do we have a motion? Was that sort of a motion with all of those?
Well, the terms for these individuals vary, and so just from a point of process, is it okay if we make this one motion, as long as we include the terms? in
Include the
each one?
terms, yep.
Okay.
So I would move that the Board of Selectmen appoint Anthony Capichetti to the Conservation Commission for a term ending June 30th, 2021. And further, that we appoint Rick Green to the Community Preservation Committee for a term ending June 30th, 2023. Further, that we appoint Wendy Smith to the Cultural Council for a term ending June 30th, 2022. And further, that we appoint Jason O'Toole to the Poet Laureate Committee for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Great.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Dick, do you want to do your 30-second?
Yeah, I think we just always, as always, we want to thank all of our volunteers in town that step up to make North Andover a great place to work, live, learn, and play. So we appreciate it. We appreciate everybody because it really is a commitment of time and you're sometimes away from your family at times, but we really appreciate those folks that step up and serve the community. So for those who are new and those who have continuing service, thank you very much.
That's great. Always appreciate that. Great. Okay, approval of our minutes. First is our open session, September 14th, 2020. Any changes or to those? And then we also have open session minutes from September 28th, 2020.
Mr. Chair, I'd move the Board of Selectmen approve the open session minutes of both September 14th and September 28th, 2020 as written.
Thank you.
Second.
All right.
Just one point of
Yes, sir.
discussion. Was there a correction from Mr. Wafers or something where
There was a public comment asking that one of the public comments in the minutes be attributed to the correct person. So we will do that if you want to make the motion as amended, rather than as presented.
Anybody like to amend that motion? I would amend my own, or,
So amend the motion to include the correction for the September 28th.
So under
Minutes.
public comment, where it says the second public comment was from Thomas Dugan, that was actually from James Weaver.
So amend the I would like to amend the motion to include that correction as stated. And Ms. Herzog.
accept that friendly amendment and second it.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. All right, on to our consent agenda. First is a request of Steve Foster, our Facilities Director, for the waiver of permit fees for fiscal year 2021 for town projects. Now, there was a little discussion about this in the past, whether we do this annually or whether that's in perpetuity, so.
We did go back and check, and last year you had just asked us to bring it back again this year. So that's why we did it again.
Okay. So that's the first consent item. The second is accepting a grant from the Center for Tech and Civil Life in the amount of $10,840 for election administration. That's pretty impressive. How did we come by that?
So that's a grant that Trudy applied for, and it is for the box outside, the ballot box that you see
Yeah,
outside. It's
saw
not
it.
quite done yet, doesn't have the town seal on it yet, so we haven't broadcast it, but it's the box that we put outside for ballots. It's just for ballots. Nope, just ballots right now, yep,
That's great.
Okay, that's
great.
good.
That's
Yeah.
impressive.
which is really good. You can drive up to it, so that's what we
Good for
wanted.
you, Trudy. Good for you. And accept a grant from the Doer Green Communities Division in the amount of $125,686 for LED lighting and weatherization. That's a hunk of money.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah.
that Lori's little
That's
special
Lori's Green
project?
Communities grant, her and Steve Foster, yeah, so.
That's fantastic. Great work. So I'll hear a motion to accept these.
Chair, I'll move the Board of Selectmen approve and accept all consent items.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. All right, town manager, what's left to report?
I know, a few quick things on my end. There's more than you would think. So we are hiring a conservation field inspector. We're interviewing for that now. We have just signed some letters, conditional appointment letters for 3 police officers. We hired Dan Beckley, welcome Dan, as our new staff planner. He started last week and is already doing a great job. We also have our fiscal year 22 budget calendar, which just looks like the budget calendar you always see, but sets out all the dates and expectations for the town, which I appreciate. And then just a few other really quick things. Halloween. So the chief will be recommending Halloween hours from 5 to 7. I have no other expectations that we will put limits on Halloween. We are encouraging people to use personal responsibility, follow CDC guidelines, use social distancing, and really try to use common sense on Halloween as much as you can. But the only official thing from the town will be a guideline for hours. And again, that's just a recommendation. We are in a drought watch right now. We're very close to a drought. So we're asking people to please pay attention to their water use, try to conserve. We have not had good rain. I know it seems like it's rained, but that rain has come down so fast that it really just runs off. So we don't, we're getting dangerously low in the lake. So we're just asking people to keep attention to that. We just talked about our ballot box, but ballots are also just starting to be mailed. So if you requested a ballot, it is starting to be mailed on our website and shared on social media today. You can actually track where your ballot is in the process. Or if you're curious, you can go right on our website and see where we are. And then finally, we do have town plumbing and gas inspectors that are going out doing final inspections for Columbia Gas. I say final, I mean it, it really is. The final inspections, I know people are hesitant and anxious to let us in, but this is like the final step to moving towards Eversource. And we have to finally sign off on all of these different inspections. And so we're just asking people to please respond to the calls. The call is coming from Columbia Gas because they are helping us set the appointments up. But the inspectors that are coming in are the town's inspectors. So we're asking you to please let us in so that we can get moving on that. So
Right, just to close. They are looking to close the permit.
we are trying to close it all out. We're
Yes.
doing the final inspections to close everything out.
Every property that was affected, or?
It's not every property. It's just ones that have had recent meter work on the inside. It's not every property, but it's about 400 properties.
So if they call,
Yes.
then you need to have it done, is
Please,
pretty
yeah,
much
please
it.
let us in,
Okay.
so we can do it the easy way. We don't want to do it the hard way, but we'd like to do that. That's really important. And we do have 3 interns right now from Merrimack. One is working with D, and 2 are actually in engineering. So they're helping us with the watershed project. So Dick can work with them on the watershed stuff, but we are excited to have the 3 interns from Merrimack right now as well. So
Are they from Monacan?
they're not from Monacan. They are not. Ours is a graduate student. So 2 of them are from the civil engineering department, yeah. So. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you for juggling those many, many balls.
It's all right.
So, select board updates.
I had the pleasure of attending the North Andover Gardens Club 100th anniversary celebration. It was held at the Stevens Estate in the tent. It was a little cool, but it was a really lovely night. So I'm just putting that out there, that if you need an event for an outdoor event, it was really very nice. The caterer was great. It was a fun event. 100 years. So just think back of what was going on 100 years ago, and it's, they all dressed like Downton Abbey and things like that, so it was kind of fun, but they
were dealing with
beautify
the
our
pandemic
town.
back then, so.
That's the first thing that came to mind was the pandemic.
They decorate our town with these beautiful arrangements, not only beautiful for the sight and smell and everything else, and amongst many other things, they do fundraisers, where they plant sales and so forth and so on. So great group of people. It was all ladies that evening, but I know that they have a few men that I believe are part of the club. But it was a very fun night, and I really enjoyed it. So if you know any of them, wish them a happy 100th birthday.
Wonderful.
No, I don't, just, the kids are back. They've been back for a week now in the hybrid program. So I know my 4th grader is excited to be back in the classroom with his teacher and his friends. So hopefully that we can continue moving forward with the kids in the classroom.
It is amazing, because I do hear from the children in the neighborhood, and we're in the same neighborhood, is the kids, their sheer excitement to go back to school. Whoever would have thought that would have happened. But
It's
they
true.
really are thrilled to be back.
They are. They really
You don't know
what you're missing.
until you
Yeah.
almost miss it, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't have any updates.
All right. I think we covered a lot of ground tonight. We've got a good follow-up. Our next meeting is going to be on Monday, March 19th. 2020?
March, boy, we
March.
got a long downtime.
We're marching towards, I'm sorry, I meant to say, we're marching towards October 19th. We have much to do. How's that?
It does feel like March 347, if
Yeah,
you really think
yeah.
about it, so.
Yeah. So with that, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Chair, I move to close the meeting of the Board of Selectmen.
All right.
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor?
Whoever.
Aye. Thank you again, everybody. Stay safe. We'll see you soon again.